Hello, good evening and welcome ladies and gentlemen to the continuation of Season 18 of the UKSimRacing GT3 Championship as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing and proudly hosted by none other than SimRacing International. That's right, the story of the Sunday Showdown continues and here today for round number 2 of 10 we've made our way to Belgium for everybody's favourite Belgian circuit. It is the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Located within the Ardennes Forest, this 4.35 mile circuit is a staple of endurance racing around the globe. Whether it be GT World Challenge Europe or alternatively the FIA World Endurance Championship, it is a circuit that with its combination of 19 corners, 3 very divisive sectors, long straights connecting them all together and plenty of twists and turns along the way, it is one that will keep drivers on their toes from lights out to check a flag, whether it be in practice, qualifying or the race of the day. And to do well here, you need to have a balance of characteristics as a driver, and you also need to be able to set your car up to go well in all 3 sectors. Prioritise straight line speed too much, and you may be quick in sector 1, but you'll come undone in sector 2. Prioritise corners too plentiful, and what you'll find out is that whilst you're going to be quick for the likes of Pouhon and the Fangers chicane, when it comes to the straights, you'll be left at a standstill, as your rivals will blast away and pass. So finding the balance is going to be key, and with strategy also thrown into the mix, there's never quite something like a perfect day at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit. You're able to come away victorious over the course of the race distance. But as our drivers get ready to take on their first endurance race round of this season, well, the rain is coming as well as we can see in the background, and it's only going to add complexity to an already complex circuit. Around here in the dry, 4.35 miles is absolutely tantalising the test, but add the rain in with the circuit is constantly evolving, and with such an extremity in terms of length of the circuit, it does mean that where it's dry at one point, it may be absolutely sodding wet at the other side of the circuit, and therefore it's going to be a circuit which is going to be absolutely uncompromising and unflinching in exactly how our drivers will have to take it on. But that's what we're here to find out. Who's going to be a rain maestro, who's going to be an endurance expert, and all in between. But where are my manners? Allow me to welcome you to this post-round broadcast from circuit side as you tune in today, catching up with all the racing action from Sunday the 12th of April 2026, bringing it to you as if it were live this Monday the 13th of April. Therefore, we do not know what happens in the sessions that are going on, although we've just had practice be completed. And therefore, we do know the story from practice. We come straight into qualifying in the background, and we'll be bringing up to speed with qualifying very shortly. And most importantly, of course, we have the race around the corner, a 90-minute race. More on that very shortly, and therefore we look forward to seeing who exactly is going to put down the big markers after an incredible season open at the Hockenheimring in Germany last time out. In the content, if you have myself, my name is Paul Walsh, and remember you can catch up with all the racing action on a weekly basis from our Sunday Showdown GT3 Championship Season 18 on the one and only place on YouTube. And of course, youtube.com and search for SimRacing International or SRI, the only place we can catch all the racing. And why not subscribe today so that way you can stay up to date with all the latest broadcasts that we do have on a weekly basis, whether they be live or post-round from circuit side. But as we make our way into this round, well, of course, let's build you up with a story recap from round number 1 and tell you exactly how things stand after an epic season opener. And so, as we can see, recapping our way to our calendar, we began the story on the 5th of April at the Hockenheimring's Grand Prix circuit. It was a 1-hour race in relatively stable sunny conditions, and therefore it was prime time for our 46 drivers who made their way out of the circuit. But what we got to see in terms of your winners, well, in the first R3 classes, the top tier, the Pro class, well, Thomas Noakes got his season off to a perfect start by taking pole position in the end, and it wasn't by a minor margin either, taking pole by 4 attempts over Harvey Wheeler, and he was only getting quicker and quicker as qualifying went on compared to his rivals. And in the race, he withstood early pressure in the opening stint from Harvey Wheeler, and he was also to withstand pressure in the pit stops from Wheeler as well, where Wheeler was able to bring the gap down from 5 seconds to only what was a second coming out of the pit lane. But in the end, Noakes just proved to have the pace in hand, which he needed to be able to run away and take a comfortable win by 5.4 seconds. Meanwhile, in the interclass, it was less straightforward. Mikey Schutt was your winner. He took second place in qualifying, missed out on pole by only 27 thousandths of a second to Brandon Vincent Squibb. But in the race, it was a good start for him that put him right on the back of his pole position rival. However, Tom Cordy had the best start of the trio, starting a little bit further behind, and it became a three-way class battle for the win. However, it all came down to lap number 2. Straight away, the 3 drivers went 3 wide into turn number 11 at Mobile 1 curve. Many of you may remember that from last week's broadcast, and if you didn't get to see that, we definitely recommend you go back and check it out, because they somehow went 3 wide through the corner. They all survived it, but it was Mikey Schutt who in the end was able to come out on top as a result of that battle, and he led the rest of the race. Although Cordy was constantly having to keep Vincent Squibb behind, and that meant the battle for second became the priority, and Stewart was allowed to run away and steal a victory. But they were all so close on pace. It could have gone any which way if it had been different on the day, but for Mikey Stewart, he took the first winner's honours of the season in the interclass. And as for the club class, meanwhile, well, Martin Kenyon took the win, but you wouldn't believe the story behind it, because he had a very underwhelming qualifying performance, some would say, starting in 7th. But you have to contextualise it, considering the fact he was 7/10 off of the pole sitter Jordan Maymar, although from 16th through to 36th overall on the qualifying grid, it was extremely tight, and that was reflecting the fact that going from 2nd through to 13th place in the club class, it was a very narrow band as well. Maymar really was the anomaly in qualifying. So what exactly changed? Well, Jordan Maymar ran away with things until the penalty system caught up with him when unsafe entry into the pit lane to take his pit stop, so him given a stop and hold 40-second penalty. So therefore, it was the battle for second place that promoted to the battle for the win. And with that, it was Grant Miller versus Martin Kenyon. Miller in the end went for the overcut versus Kenyon's undercut, and it was Miller who came out in front by only half a second. And it seems though it's going to be Grant Miller's win. But there was a late altercation between him and another driver with John Harley, and what it meant was that with Miller falling backwards, it was Kenyon's to take, and he took that victory in the end with only 3 laps to go. But what a story it was, and indeed those were just the winners' stories from last round, and here we are today then for round number 2 at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, the first of our 2 90-minute endurance race rounds. We've got wet weather on the cards as well, and more up speed on the weather very shortly in terms of what we can expect, but it is going to be a thriller. And next time out, we make our way to Italy for the Autodromo International del Mugello, and there will be a 1-hour race under sunny skies perhaps. But as we come into this round, well, we've recapped who the winners exactly were, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the standings when we do head to circuit side. But let's talk a little bit about our host circuit. Because, of course, we're on the Grand Prix pit lane variant of the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. Now, the circuit stays the same, regardless of what variant you run these days. Indeed, we do not have anymore the long run into the Ardennes Forest that used to extend the best part of almost 15 kilometres. Indeed, those days of racing around local villages and end up in barns, well, that's definitely a long time in the past due to health and safety. But the Grand Prix pit lane means that our drivers will have the pit lane on the run onto the new start for this straight, which precedes La Source, whereas the endurance starting point of race, of course, would be on the run past the old pit lane. So coming out of La Source and heading towards Eau Rouge and ready on to slow the entry speeds into the uphill fast right into left-hander. As the drivers get ready to go racing today, well, this circuit located in the village of Francorchamps in the municipality of Stavelot in the Wallonia region of the province Liège in Belgium. I think I've got that right this time. Well, indeed, quite a mouthful there, and a mouthful of a circuit to handle, and a huge thank you to iRacing.com, not just for their brilliant simulator, but the absolutely fantastic track maps that come with it. And we do have a link for 4.35 miles or 7 kilometres. Well, what never changes, regardless of the years, is the number of quarters. 19 of them, and many of them household names. You got the hairpin of La Source that opens up the lap before you go charging your way in towards the uphill left combination of Eau Rouge and Radio turns 2, 3, and 4. That's one of the most daring high-speed complexes of any circuit in the world. And then it's on to the fast Kimmel Straight. Then we go into Sector 2, which is all about the medium to high-speed corners as it begins with Lecom at turns 5 and 6, and then gives way to Malmedy at turn number 7, and down the hill they go into Ravage at turn number 8. Another hairpin corner, but an off-camber one at that, and you're constantly going downhill as you take the apex, and therefore it means you can't get on the throttle too early, otherwise you'll understeer wide. Get it right, and then you'll be into No Name Corner, now known as Jackie X Corner, in honour of the venerable Belgian racer. And as the drivers make the way through the downhill left-hander there, 90 degrees of quarter, it will then be into a very sharp double left, the high speed combination that turns 10 and 11, known affectionately as Pouhon Bend, and it's all about bravery there. Coming out, get the speed there, and you'll have to come onto the brakes of the Fantasy Chicane at turns 12 and 13, which is going to be a test of trail braking ability and being able to join the dots together before coming in towards Stavelot 1 at turn number 14. That completes the middle sector, and then into the final sector, starting with Stavelot 2 or Curveball Ferrier, and that'll be flat out in qualifying fuel if we didn't have wet weather, but with the rain it won't be flat out through there, and then it's going to be a charge all the way through the Kidka 16 and towards Blanchimont Bend at turn number 17, the sharp left-hander, which is all about commitment. And as the drivers make the way out there, they'll head in towards the bus stop chicane, the sharp braking zone, or will be at turns 18 and 19, a chicane which definitely will see plenty of overtaking action, and may also see a few drivers fall victim to spins if they touch the curves too high or go too deep, and that'll complete lap to see them find a way to another one, or alternatively finally find that checkered flag. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's make our way back to circuit side, see how they're getting on in qualifying our drivers, but also bring up to speed with the top 3 in each of the standings after our opening round. And as we can see, our drive's heading around, the weather right now definitely not looking good out there at all. Now, it does seem as though Eduardo Royes has absolutely nailed his qualifying performance straight away, in the fact that he's on a 2-minute 34.054. Now, given the fact the rain only started to fall at the beginning of the qualifying, practically when the drivers got told they got 30 minutes, it's go, 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 when it means we have gone from a dry circuit to a wet circuit. So the aim of the game has been to try and get out there straight away, whether it's on slick tyres, which are trying to pump as much heat into as possible, or alternatively on wet tyres that are going to overheat, but they will offer you some grip before the rain really starts to arrive. Well, either way, if you can get that lap absolutely nailed on straight away, then you are going to be an anomaly at the very top of the time tower, and it does seem as though that's what Eduardo Royes has been able to do. So we may be in a position whereby essentially this qualifying session becomes more of a practice session after about 10 minutes. We have still got 18 minutes of it left to go, and several drivers have not set times, and we do have the best part of 50 drivers in attendance here today, so therefore this could be a really shaken up qualifying order. These qualifying sessions where the rain arrives at the start of the qualifying session are always challenging ones, because you really need to be on your best bet out there, otherwise you lose a lot of effective or potential track time. As we do look to Brandon Vincent Squibb, making his way on through Lacombe there, and Malmedy, well, in the Ford Mustang car that's not easy to drive in the wet. You really do have to rely on the traction control there, because the 5-litre V8 engine will spin up those rear wheels very aggressively. Well, right behind him, a Mercedes following there, the Mercedes AMG, and that car just as much a handful, many would say. And we look to another one here in the form of Tom Cordy as he heads on around, and indeed 6.3-litre V8 naturally aspirated, and the rear wheels will spin massively in the lower gears, and that's the one thing you've got to be very careful of. But we digress. Who stands inside the top 3 of each of your classes then? Well, the Pro class, understandably, Thomas Noakes is currently the championship leader. As we mentioned, he took the win in the season opener in Germany, and right now thinking to himself that he could definitely be the favourite, or at least his qualifying pace at the Hockenheim ring seemed to set him as a favourite. But again, with the changeable conditions today, and the fact that he is currently the best part of 2.6 seconds of a Fotis Katios' provisional pole time in the Pro class, it could be a very different story. But as he heads on around here, he definitely seemed to show, at least in the dry, that he was a slight step ahead of the rest of the competition. But the man who currently stands in second is none other than not Tom Cordy, not Tom Wheeler, it's Harvey Wheeler there, so I got my names mixed up. And Harvey Wheeler right now, who you see here in the Mercedes AMG Evo, well, what's his story? Well, he wasn't as quick over a single lap compared to Thomas Noakes, but what he was very good at doing was being very consistent over race distance and also strategy. The three-wheeler racing by a Vizio driver definitely looked as though if it had been a slightly longer race perhaps, he might have been able to gain even more ground. Well, the good news is it's a 90-minute race today, so perhaps he can surprise everybody by being just that little bit quicker over the race distance. So we look forward to seeing, because he definitely looked quite confident, and he just needs to find a 10th or two, and I think he will be on parity over race distance versus Noakes. But again, Noakes may step up as well. It'll always be interesting to see how our drivers evolve and improve as the season goes on. Even the very best out there can always go a little bit faster. But meanwhile, your third place finisher last time out in the Pro class was Kyle Roy. Now, his story was very different, because he enjoyed a debut in the Pro class, being our Inter champion from the previous season, season 17, back when it was known as the Pro class. But we're going to stay away from the old terminology. We're going to stay in the New Testament terminology here, because otherwise people get confused. Indeed, if I start making any Bible references, it'll get biblical here, because it is raining right now. But as we do see Kyle Roy making his way, oh, that goes very well there at Pouhon Bend, taking a bit too much exit curve, and the rear of the car completely going around at him on the Corvette Z06 GT3 RC8 Stingray edition, as he makes his way on down on the escape road there, and very gradually brings himself back on. This is always difficult, because you'll see there, just on the end of the exit curve, there's a big puddle of water, so he's trying to find a way to negotiate it. He squeezes his way through, but he doesn't want to drive back on via the curb, because that curb will send the car sliding around, but he doesn't want to drive into the water either, as even on the wet tyres, he is at risk of aquaplaning. So as he makes his way up to speed now, or an innocent mistake, but let's talk about some of the positives, which was his performance in Germany. And the positive was the fact that he was third in qualifying, and he was the best part of what was almost 2 tenths ahead of Casper Brotner, who was next to line up on the pro grid, and he had a rather comfortable start to finish drive for third place. He's not looking comfortable at all there as it goes wrong through Stavlo 2. He did lose third place to Brotner towards the end of the first stint, but he prioritised fuel saving, and that was his ace up his sleeve, as he was able to take that third place back after the pit stops, whereas Brotner had not been doing the fuel saving by comparison. And that's the one thing this Corvette is very good at doing, it is fuel saving. It's got a lot of torque in most of the gears, and therefore you can be quite strategic, and also it's very good at tyre saving. They were looking to try and close the gap to the top 2 on pace today. That was the one downside he had, and why he was not able to get involved versus Noakes and Wheeler. Now in the interclass, meanwhile, well, as we mentioned earlier on, Mikey Stewart your winner last time out, and indeed enjoying an absolutely brilliant battle. Now, is Mikey here today? Yes, he is in his BMW M4 Evo, and well, he went all in. It was really risk versus reward, and he was rewarded for taking the high risk on lap number 2 with that big, sensational free wide overtake versus Vincent Squibb and Tom Cordy. But meanwhile, thinking of your run-up last time out of Tom Cordy, well, where is he on the road at the moment? And the answer to that question is he's somewhere out there. We're just waiting to try and find him at the moment. And indeed, our cameramen furiously at work trying to find Cordy's car. But what we can do in turn is show you your third place finish from the last time out. Type 2 races, Brandon Vincent Squibb in Interclass. And well, he took the pole position in the end. He only took pole by 300ths over Stewart, Mikey Stewart that is. But in the end, it was so close, and it was a poor start for him in the race, which really hurt him and led to that freeway battle for lead on lap number 2. And well, he was equal to Cordy over the distance, but you could say he was equal to Stewart as well. But Tom Cordy really became his rival. And speaking of Tom Cordy, he is making his way back out the pit lane now. So the 217 Mercedes driver getting ready to go once again. And I suspect the one thing he will have been kicking himself for in Germany was the fact he had a lot of qualifying pace. He showed it in practice, but unfortunately his qualifying lap that he set wasn't the lap he was targeted, it would seem. So therefore, I think it was a missed opportunity for the Mercedes driver to try and put himself on pole there. Could have been a very different story in Germany if he had taken at the interpole position. Well, that's always a question, as well as what if ones that we'll never truly get an answer to. As the club class, well, we've got plenty of club drivers out there. And here's Grant Miller, the runner-up from last time out. And, well, currently down in 33rd place in this qualifying session, albeit on an out lap at the moment. I think just trying to find the right setup and the time out there. And as he makes his way on down. Well, the McLaren driver will definitely feel as though he was robbed of the win last time out in Germany. But indeed, Lady Luck fortune some, and didn't always fortune him. Indeed, Lady Luck fortune both him and Martin Kenyon when it all went wrong for Jordan Butler by just simply tucking a wheel a little bit too far. Well, that's what really ended up seeing him take the opportunity. In fact, Jordan and Maymar there. Let me get my surnames correct. There's so many Jordans on the grids at SimRacing International. I'm getting confused with another Jordan from the Thursday series, and I do apologise for that. But Jordan Maymar with an unsafe pit entry, and in the end, Grant Miller was one of the beneficiaries of it. And indeed, used strategy to overcut Martin Kenyon. But then that late incident cost him the win, and it meant he finished just behind. But he still had to see the positives from it, and one of the positives was the fact that he's definitely on podium pace for this season in the club class, although Kenyon in the end was the one who was just as equal to him in a way, and the two of them were literally nose to tail for the majority of the race. Martin Kenyon at the moment, currently third fastest of everybody, and well, I somehow suspect that he might be sat there taking that provisional pole in the club class. He's got his lap done quite early, and that's why he's sat in the pit lane currently. But we know his story in the fact that he missed out on the pit stops versus Miller, but he was able to pick up the piece where Miller had it go wrong with only 3 laps to go, and in the end it all went a bit wrong for this man. He was absolutely leading the way. 7 seconds was the gap he had when he came into the pit lane, and then suddenly that stop and hold 40-second penalty for touching a white line on entry into the pit lane really upset the balance there for the SimCast Racing Team UK driver of Maymar. But still, plenty more rounds to come, and he still had a half-decent result to be fair, picking up some points, and he's got to take the positives from the day, which was in the dry. He seemed unconquerable, but in the wet today, it's going to be a very different challenge. But then who exactly finished third in the club class last time out here, you ask? Well, the answer to that is Ryan Clark, and Ryan Clark definitely had a very positive day in the office, although on paper you would have thought perhaps he wasn't going to have a good day, and I don't know if he's here today. In fact, yes he is. There he is in the wonderful green machine, and as he makes his way on around the Spectra, well, his story, simply put, was that he started 5th in qualifying in the fact that he found himself right in the midst of the top 10 of the club class. It was a very close top 10 in the club qualifying session, excluding Maymar's absolutely dominant pole lap. And well, after that, we saw his poor start in the race actually dropped into the very back of the top 10 in the class, but he gradually worked his way forward and used the overcut like Grant Miller to make up the place to the strategy. If he had had the better start, some would say he was contesting the podium or due to contest it from the outset, but his poor start meant that in the end he was due to finish 4th, but he benefited from the stop and hold penalty of Maymar and then was promoted to the podium. But that is not to besmirch or undermine his achievements, but he's got to work on the fact that qualifying definitely seemed to be his Achilles heel, and also his race start added to it, and it was the poor race start that really hurt him in terms of being able to chase after the likes of Miller and Kenyon, of which he had the pace to match on the opening stint. His pace was slightly off of them in the second stint. So that's a recap of your top 3 in each of our driver classes coming into this round, and indeed we've got plenty more to go around here in terms of points and action, and plenty more stories to be narrated. Now we can't bring out to be the Teams Championship coming into this round, so those team points still being calculated, and normally they will become available going into round number 3 or by round number 4 at the very latest. And we will show you some official standings, most likely going into round 3 in a week's time. Of course, those standings still being worked on by the SimRacing International stewards. But after one round, we can always talk about your top 3, of course, because we know exactly where everybody finished. But finishing that off, and now coming into the final throws of qualifying, well, I don't think anyone's going to be beating this pole lap right now. There's 2 minute 34.054, and Eduardo Roy as well. He is no stranger to big achievements in wet and changeable conditions. Many of you will remember, of course, his time at VAR a few seasons ago, in fact a season ago, last season, where the Ferrari driver was absolutely ferocious. The Spaniard in the end flying high, and the only thing that held him back in the end was a mistake of his own volition, with VAR having plenty of puddles out there, and he found one of the many puddles that ended up in Hogpen Corner, because otherwise he was set to potentially dominate in his class that day at VAR. It all went a bit backwards, but something tells me he's got the lap in right at the start when the circuit was starting to get wet, and subsequently he can now back off and just simply practice his wet pace over the distance. And in terms of the weather we are expecting here today, well, the rain was due to arrive literally as qualifying was about to get underway, and that it has done, and we're expecting this rain to stop towards the end of the qualifying session, which it seems to be stopping right now. So look at my commentator booth window, and we've got some rain towards the front end of the circuit at the start point, as Thomas Noakes demonstrates here, and he just made his way past my commentator booth. But meanwhile, at the other end of the circuit, down towards Stablo 1 and Stablo 2, we've got no rain falling, and that's the problem. When you've got such an extreme length for a circuit, or one that covers plenty of terrain, it does mean that where it can be raining at one end and meanwhile not raining at the other, you have got a very changeable circuit. And well, there are other circuits much longer, of course, including the likes of the Nürburgring and Nordschleife, albeit we're not going that extreme in terms of lengths this season, ladies and gentlemen, but I think you get the picture of the fact that because it is a longer circuit, therefore the rain can be on one side but not the other. Now, we are also expecting the rain to come back for the first 35 to 40 minutes of our 1.5 hour race, which is going to make things interesting. So towards the end of this qualifying session now, we will start to see the circuit dry a little bit, although I don't think our drivers are going to be drying it that much, as Noakes more sideways and straight they're going for expend, but he's pushing hard as he possibly can here, and I think trying to graft out a bit of a quicker lap time. He has in fact been on a personal best chain recently, a 2 minute 39.14, albeit going sideways with Pouhon again. Car going very sideways off the road. That's Maymar there, who goes to rejoin, but not before Noakes makes his way on past. So good awareness on both drivers, and Noakes right now definitely trying to put the hammer down here. And well, understandably, if the rain is due to come back for what is almost the first half of the race, although again that is an estimated timeline, we are running timeline based conditions here in SimRacing International Series. We are not running forecasted conditions, just because of the absolute bedlam that the forecasted conditions could cause. And what we mean by that is you would have enough rain in several instances to essentially have the race red flagged. Many of you may remember, of course, what happened in the UKSR series, i.e. this series at Daytona last season, where the rain was absolutely incredulous to the point that really overtaking was more guesswork than technical work, and you could barely see. And also in the infield section of Daytona, there was so much water in the end. Well, I'll tell you one thing, they tried to get brooms out between qualifying and the race to get the rain off of the track surface, and they ran out of brooms and time, and that's how difficult it was. But as Anton Kilo makes his way up the hill, well, on towards the Kemmel Straight, good to see him on the grid today, the MK Sim Sport team. Quite ferocious out there, but we need to bring in on board like with one of our drivers, ladies and gentlemen, and to do so we're going to jump on board, I think, with Martin Kenyon. If he stays out, he does, and so here we go with your club provisional pole sitter and currently club championship leader as he takes us around for a flying lap of the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. To make his way down towards turn 1, brings the car over to the left hand side and on to the brakes he goes, 100 metres from corner apex, all the way down the first gear, trail braking into the middle of the corner to avoid the water that's building on the inside curve. Now heading up towards Eau Rouge and Radion. This will be very different in the wet as he makes his way along the curve straight, and now getting ready to head in towards the bends. And coming in here, he won't take too much curve on entry, he'll just take it very gently, lifts off the throttle there, hold in 4th gear, and now flat out all the way along, takes a little bit of exit curve. He'll get away with that because he is pointing the steering wheel straight as humanly possible, now making his way over the transition there. There's a lot of water that does flow across the circuit going onto the Kemmel Straight, then I'll shake the car around a little bit, but now getting ready for Lake On. Looks to his left-hand side. His brake marker will be the curb going into the corner on his left. And, well, as he goes a little bit deep there to avoid the water, you can see he's trying to thread the needle here and find the grip. Doing a really good job of it, Kenyon, as he now brings the car over to the left-hand side to open up Malmedy Bender turn number 7. There, taking it easy on the throttle. Normally you'd run it all the way to the curb, but not when there's water on it. And now onto the brakes here into a Zarage. Again, the fact he's a bit slower coming into the corner. He can go a bit late on the brakes, but goes deep there. Does bring it back into a V-shape approach, but now fighting with oversteer. as he heads in towards X Bend. And here, with an unsettled line, that's going to cause him to go a bit deep, but in the end does get arrested just in the nick of time. Now heading down towards Pouhon Bend. Looking over to his right-hand side for his brake mark. It will be after the 50 board and braking about 100 metres from corner apex as he rolls his way down. And you can see they're having to fight constantly with understeer to oversteer as he can't get the throttle down. They're holding 4th gear and now bring the car over to the left-hand side. The brakes once again very shortly, coming all the way down for the Vantage chicane. Decides to hold 3rd gear, lets it go deep, and now bring the car over to the right here to avoid the water on the inside of turn 13. And that gives him better traction on the exit and able to build up a bit more speed before Stablo 1. Here it's the downhill braking zone, so all the water is gradually heading towards the inside of the corner. Lovely line there from Kenyon. Now in towards Stablo 2 here. This is going to be a lift, a coast, wait for the nose to pick up, and then get the throttle on if you dare. A little bit of oversteer there, mid-engine rear-wheel drive car, you've got to expect it when he tries to get the throttle down, but once the rear is planted, it normally grips up quite quickly. And now up towards Blanchimont he goes. He'll be flat out in the dry, but not so here right now as he gets ready to go into the fast left-hander. As he does so, it'll be a lift off the throttle, hold 5th gear, a little bit of throttle perhaps being held on just to stabilise the rear, and now getting ready for the bus stop chicane. Looking to the left-hand side of his brake mark, it will be about 170 metres from quarter apex all the way down to 1st gear. Keeps it nice and tight on entry. It's going to be tight again for the second part of the chicane. Heads towards the timeline as Thomas Noakes, meanwhile, improves to 2 minute 38.137. And Kenyon heads to the timeline. Does he improve this time around? The answer is going to be no, he does not. But he gives us a wonderful onboard perspective there of a lap of the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. A big thank you to Martin Kenyon. Now, we are seeing some improvements out there as Brandon Vincent Squibb moves up to 13th place on 2 minute 39.308. So, by the looks of things, the circuit, whilst it is still quite damp out there, you can see quite the spray cover the back of the cars. In fact, it does seem as though at some points of the circuit we are starting to see a dry line. And so, those are on a lap, and we do have overtime in this qualifying session. I wonder if we're starting to see several drivers really leap their way up. Luke Sherlock now jumps to 20th there on a 2 minute 40.485. So, this qualifying session coming alive right at the end, which is absolutely brilliant. Harry Svern comes towards the timeline. What can he do? He jumps to 32nd. He gets one more lap of this, one more go. Given the fact the lap times now best shy of just over 2.5 minutes. But meanwhile, as they all head on around, who else is perhaps improving out there? Who's perhaps not improving? Well, right now, one driver who definitely does want to improve quite a bit will be Grant Miller as he heads towards the timeline. 2 minute 44.990, he improves, but he does not find any more places. He stays 40th, and well, that's going to translate into 10th place in the club class currently. Now, we do have a penalty today, or a pair of penalties applied to a single driver, and that's John Harley in the interclass, and these are all for round number 1, where he's picked up licence points on his racing licence, and he does have a qualifying ban and also a drive-through penalty. They have been merged together for this round, so therefore that's why you're not seeing Harley out there in qualifying, and well, you'll see him in the race, have to come into the pit lane at some point. He must choose when he wants to come in to serve his drive-through penalty, but he must serve it over the race distance. The penalty will be added to when he goes into his next round. Now, we do have a few drivers who've not set times. Jason Brennan, James Connolly, Darren Giacovelli, David Young and Kieran Davidson, on top of John Harley not being allowed to set a time. So therefore we will have some names starting towards the back. And well, meanwhile, Jack Barker's out there, and well, that's a bit different. In an Aston Martin Vantage Evo, I would not have expected the made-for racing driver to go to the Aston Martin, but we'll have to wait and see how this plays out for him. Normally, he's a big advocate of mid-engine rear-wheel drive, but he's gone front mid-engine rear-wheel drive instead. And well, I wonder if putting the engine over the nose is going to work out for him. Indeed, a very different driving style, but I'm sure he'll get used to it, although the Aston Martin is considered to be the handling car of the front-engine rear-wheel drive cars, so it might be an interesting compromise for him. He's currently 14th fastest, 6th in the interclass. It is looking good for Barker, to be fair. But meanwhile, is anybody else improving out there? Thomas Noakes heads towards the line. He's currently 4th fastest. He's really been finding the time. I don't think he's going to go any quicker as he goes on to one last lap. The clock says 0, so that means qualified is complete, and Jordan Maymart leaves it literally to the death for qualifying, but he jumps up to 13th for 2 minute 38.859. I think he'll wanted one more lap. He won't get it, however. He was short of the time in line, and well, that's an impressive performance there. Even so, Andre Montine heads on down, and right now the Axis Simsport driver here, what can he do in the number 200 as Kyle Roy suddenly leaps his way, heads 14th place at 2 minute 38.979. That's a good lap from Kyle Roy, and we know he's one of those drivers you can never quite counter. He does thrive in challenging conditions, and particularly many of you will remember at VIR when he did pull off that absolutely brilliant run, although he was beaten by Nathan Anstis, who despite picking up a drive-through penalty was able to stay alive for just long enough. But meanwhile, as Jack Barker heads towards the timeline, what's it going to be for him? He goes 3rd, and that's a 2 minute 37.455. A very late and impressive performance there for Jack Barker. This Aston Martin could be working out for him, but can anybody else bring some surprises? We see Nick Parks in the machinery there for Phoenix Racing Blue coming on around. now for the last couple of quarters, fighting with power oversteer in that first and second gear combination. I suspect he'll be using second gear, but even so, there's a lot of torque steer on that. He will go into 26 for 2 minute 40.573. That puts him 12th in Inter. There comes Grant Miller. Does Miller improve? He does, but he only moves to 35th. Meanwhile, St. Anthony's still out there. Where's St. Anthony going to go? Well, right now he's going to keep it on the circuit if he can. Going down towards the bus stop chicane. We haven't really talked about the Welshman, but it's good to see him back on the grid once again for UKSimRacing Hamilton this season. As he makes his way over the last two bends here, what's it going to be? Can he potentially move up from 18th place? And, well, 6 seconds off the overall pole time. I don't think anyone's going to be meeting Eduardo Royes. A 2 minute 39.042. A good improvement there. Just puts him ahead of Vincent Squibb. And we've got Matthew Massey out there. Currently 8th fastest in the club class. He's got company behind. That's Anton Kalo. But Kalo right now cannot overtake him unless he feels as though he can do it without compromising the other driver's line. Although Massey heading towards the timeline here, Kayla's going to get out of the way, and Massey comes through. Does he improve? The answer is he did improve in some of the sectors, but he invalidated a lap, so it does not count. Archie Williams heads towards the line. He might be the very last driver to get a lap together. In fact, no, it'll be Thomas Noakes. Williams goes to 10th there, a 2 minute 38.582, so good effort from him. Puts him 4th now in the pro class. But what about Noakes here? Can he somehow find a way to snatch away 9/10 of a second? And you can see the back end of the circuit is still quite wet. It's the opening sector that's suddenly really drying up. And when Noakes heads towards the line here, he's been personal best in the opening sector. He's had a good middle sector as well. It's a 2 minute 36. He moves to second place. What a last minute improvement there for Noakes. And Fotis Katios right now, I think he's going to suddenly look at the time tower and the TSL screens inside his paddock pit lane and essentially go, hold up a second, how on earth did a Ford Mustang just beat me? Well, that's Thomas Noakes for you, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why we reckon he's one of the early favourites for this season. If he do something like that at the end of the session, what else can he do? And well, we'll have to find out, because as qualifying comes to an end, and we look to the scenic view where Eduardo Royes takes an overall pole position there by 2.5 seconds in his Ferrari, a 2 minute 34.054 ahead of Thomas Noakes, who will be the pro pole sitter, who just squeezed ahead of Fotis Katios at the end. Although saying just squeezed, it was the margin of 7/10 pretty much precisely there. And then Jack Barker takes his best qualifying performance in some time since he's been on the grid, and the Aston Martin driver will be second of your Inter drivers. Martin Kenyon got it done early. He takes club pole in 5th place ahead of Andrew Montine and Austin Graff, who are 3rd and 4th in Inter. And your top 10 will be rounded out by the pro of Max Wheeler, 3rd in class, ahead of Stephen Wilkinson, who after his very impressive debut, well, I think he's going to be targeted the podium today. That's 2nd in club in 9th place, and Archie Williams will complete the top 10. But there's some surprises out there. Well, a big shout out to Tom Wheeler. He starts 12th, 3rd in club class, and Jordan Maymine then did manage to salvage something out this qualifying session, 4th in club, 15th overall, but definitely plenty of surprises as we do make our way now into what is your warm-up session. So we've got a 5-minute warm-up. Now, this will be a very interesting warm-up session, and the reason for that, as we do see Hendrik Zilka starting to make his way out of the pit lane, is because we are expecting the rain to return at the start of the race. So, drivers going out there right now, it won't be to experiment with setup. I suspect it may be to try and just see if they can burn away some of the water. The idea being, if the rain's going to come back, it's meant to be light rain that we're seeing on the weather radar, and therefore it may not be rain that's going to fully top up the circuit. It may just keep it stable. So if they can try to remove some water now, before what's the best part of 50 cars all go roaring around this circuit, it might be a little bit of an easier circuit to go racing at. Of course, all our drivers will be constantly trying to fix their setups and make adjustments, as that's Martin Kenyon there having a bit of a difficult exit out the pit lane, I do believe, and having to park up there on the exit of Radion, and the Pistech Racing driver in the end gets pointed in the right direction just in the nick of time. He rejoins. But as we see Max Galgay for Split Track Esports teaming up, of course, with Fotis Katios for this season in the Acura NSX Evo. And, well, your 107 driver here definitely picking a car that's not popular, and it goes on around then. That's one of the reasons why it is not popular. That rear end is hypersensitive. If you thought the rear end of the Audi R8 Evo 2 LMS was sensitive, well, the NSX will definitely be saying to the Audi, hold my beer. But as he gets it pointed back in the straight line, well, that was less Eau Rouge and more Mon Dieu. And he makes his way onwards, and he tries to pick it up. Well, the 107 driver here definitely right now will not be wanting to make that mistake when we go green flag racing. Now, of course, some of the things to consider is that in these GT3 setup-wise, well, they do have the ability between qualifying and the race to make tweaks to the setup. They will, of course, be putting race fuel into the car, although not everyone may be putting a full tank of fuel into the car. Now, this is a little bit of intrigue that I've only been to find out a bit more about from some of the drivers down the pit lane in recent weeks in the SRI GT3 series, in the fact that we do, of course, have a restricted fuel tank of a certain amount. and that amount being at 70%. But some drivers perhaps opt not to run the full 70%, but actually run a little bit less for their open stint. The idea being they give themselves a lighter car. Now, why would you do that, perhaps, here today at Spa-Francorchamps? Well, if we're expecting rain in what will be the first half of the race, you may find actually by taking a slightly lighter fuel tank, you may have a slightly quicker car over the time where we've got the rain. As the circuit begins to dry up, if you time it right on the pit stop, you may be able to transition over, have the lighter car before the pit stop, and then, well, you have to put the fuel back in. You have to put a bit more fuel in perhaps to get to the end of the race, but the whole theory would be that you are going to have a lighter car over your stints, whether it's 2 or 3 stints you do, and it may just help out. So that's always a fault. Another fault out there, of course, is the fact that, of course, they will be changed at some point, most likely from wets to slick tyres, if the weather forecast is accurate. But will they be making any tweaks to the car after they've dialed it in? Well, wet weather setups normally do run a lot more downforce in the car. They normally max out the rear wing as much as possible in order to be able to get as much rear end stability, although if you do trim off a little bit, particularly if you're in a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car such as our Lamborghinis, or rear-engine rear-wheel drive such as Alexander Wingmark's Porsche 992 GT3 for the Beta Frost team that you see here, well, you might be able to get away with give yourself some more straight line speed, but they are allowed, as I understand it, to tweak what is the rear wing and the splitter settings on these cars in the pit lane, although it costs an extra 10 seconds in the pits to do so, and it is done only once fuel and tyres have been completed. So therefore, it cannot be touched simultaneously. So whatever length the pit stop is, well, you do add another 10 seconds on if you mount those tweaks, but suddenly you may have a car that's much more lively and aggressive towards the end of the race if you do so, and it can pick up even more pace. And Spa-Francorchamps is a very interesting circuit on downforce because it's not a high downforce circuit. You can set a car up many ways around here. You normally are looking for medium to high downforce, but of course you've got those long straights there, and being able to shred a little bit of rear wing off the car can help you out on the Kemmel Straight and also run up towards Blanchimont on the bus stop. So that will be a fault. We may see some longer pit stops there as drivers tweak their cars. But Fotis Katios, he'll be a little bit tweaked in the fact that he'll just missed out on pro pole position. The Split Straight Esports driver still starting on the second row of the grid today, and I think he'll be pleased about that. But wondering how on earth Thomas Noakes managed to steal it away literally with his final lap. But nobody, of course, was able to touch Eduardo Royes. So there's plenty of strategic considerations. Also another consideration is, do we see this as a one-stop race? Is there the risk of it being a two-stop? Well, I suspect as many drivers as possible, if they think a one-stop is theoretically possible, they will go for it. And a wet circuit, of course, sees the amount of fuel usage per lap reduced significantly, should not full throttle anywhere near as much, or running to the red line anywhere near as often, and therefore it could really open up the strategy dynamics today. Fuel saving could be just as critical as keeping it on the road and keeping it safe. But for that, and plenty more, ladies and gentlemen, well, the good news is our wait is over, the warm-up is complete, it's time to head to the grid for round number 2 of the UKSimRacing Sunday Showdown GT3 Championship Season 18, brought to you on iRacing and hosted by none other than SimRacing International here from the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. And so, as our drivers make the way onto the grid, this is how they'll line up for our one and only race today. As the rain comes back in full force, it is Eduardo Royes who takes pole position there for Axis SimSports with Ashley Brooks Designs. Indeed, the Spaniard absolutely delivering in qualifying. He'll be ecstatic about that. He took pole position in the end by a grand total of none other than 2.5 seconds. But joining him on that front row is going to be your pro pole sitter. Behind the interpole sitter, it's MK SimSports' Thomas Noakes. He left it very late to the qualifying session, but sometimes it's better late than never. And Fotis Katios lines up behind in there for Split Straight Esports in third place. We then do see Mate Races Jack Barker switch to the Aston Martin, and it's definitely gone down well so far, and he starts fourth, secondly into drivers. Then it'll be your club pole sitter, winner of course, and race number 1 of the season, Martin Kenyon for Piztech Racing, just ahead of Andrew Montine for Axis SimSports Smurfs, and while the remaining driver there, knowing with a third row start, he's definitely got a prime opportunity for at least a podium in class, if not the class win. Started 7th, just behind him, only what is a grand total of 300ths off will be Austin Graff for Axis SimSports of Ashley Brooks Designs, and it'll be a Max Wheeler for Verso Fast by Free Wheeler Racing. Stephen Wilkinson starting in 9th today for Simcast Racer UK. Second of your club drivers, a very impressive qualifying performance, and then we will see starting in 10th Archie Williams for Axis SimSports with SimWorks. Outside your top 10 in length is going to be Tim Probert for Send It Racing, ahead of Tom Wheeler for Verso Rapid by Free Wheeler Racing, who is third of your club drivers. Steve Hobbs starts in 13th for SimCoach, just ahead of Ashley Brooks for SimSports, Axis SimSports Bandits there. Goodness me, as I get my Ashley's and my Axis completely mixed up. But still, they're all allied in the fact they are ahead of Jordan Maymar for Simcast Racing UK. Maymar starts fourth in the club class, just ahead of Kyle Roy, who had late improvements in qualifying, but Scotsman for Axis SimSports with SimWorks there, definitely known as more work to be done. Cy Anti for Team UKSimRacing Hamilton starts 17th, and indeed leads a whole pack of inter-drivers, with Brandon Vincent Squibb the next, joining him on the 9th row for Type 2 Racing. Ryan Powney begins today 19th for SimCoach, ahead of Phoenix Racing Red's Tom Cordy. That completes your top 20, and outside the top 20 you do have Hayden Young for Zendit Racing, ahead of Harvey Wheeler for Averso Rapid by Freewheeler Racing. Now it's going to be the machinery of Anton Kalo starting 23rd for MK SimSport, ahead of Luke Sherlock for Darkwing Racing, and then we do come to Matthew Croft for Axis SimSport Bandits, ahead of Nick Parks. From the Phoenix Racing Blue Drive is 26th, it's 27th place for Old Dudes and Cars Vintages, Daniel Pays, and then we do have Mikey Stewart starting at 28th today for Axis SimSports with SimCoach. Darren Sharples starts 29th there for Old Dudes and Cars Amnesia, and then he'll be in the company of Steve Hughes, who completes your top 30 for Team UKSimRacing Norris, and outside the top 30 in 31st, it is Jordan Butler, and I do believe that's the other member of the Jordans here. Yes, it is. There are both of them here. My goodness. I was right in the first place. The Spectra Feet SimWorks UK driver making his way onto the grid, just ahead of Hendrik Silk for Old Dudes and Cars Amnesia. Matt Skelgay starts 31st for Split Straight Esports, ahead of Harry Savan for Spectra Racing Feet Murby, and then it's Grant Miller for Phoenix Racing Red, ahead of Matthew Massey for Spectra Racing. The round of club drives concludes for Alexander Wingmark in 37th for Beta Frost, ahead of the machinery of Jake Muttett for Phoenix Racing Blue, and then we're going to have the machinery of Peter Holt there, who's actually started from the pit lane for Sendit Racing Bulls, just ahead of David Pilcher for Simcast Racing UK. Outside the top 40, it's Casper Rotner, 41st for Old Dudes and Cars Vintage, ahead of Ryan Littleball there for Verso Fast by Freewheeler Racing, and then we do have Ryan Clark starting in 43rd for Spectra Racing, ahead of John Harley for Spectra Racing Feet Murby. No qualifying time set, of course, with the qualifying ban, but he will be ahead of David Young, the privateer from South Africa, and James Conley for Team UKSimRacing Norris, and then we will see Jason Brennan for Spectra Feet SimWorks UK 47th, ahead of Kieran Davidson, who's not taken to the grid, I believe a technical issue with the Type 2 Racing Scotsman's car, and then Darren Giacovelli as well, not taking the grid to a technical issue, started 49th. But the field is almost with us, ladies and gentlemen, at the start point. The formation lap is almost complete, and as they all come on down there, we can see the rain is definitely still falling, but Eduardo Royes right now 9 for him. Will the places all fall into line, or will the pros and his inter-rows around him find a way through? Well, that's a plenty more. We're about to find out, because as the field comes on down and we see Jordan Maymar itching to go green, as they all are. Where's the Eduardo Royes to take us to the green for 90 minutes of racing. And round number 2 gets underway just like that. It's go, go, go as they roar the way down towards turn 1. It's going to be slippery, and let's not recreate Belgium 1997 for those in the know. And as they come onto the brakes here, where Eduardo Royes has a good start, as Adrian Mantini goes very deep, understeers wide, and as they all come out to opening corner, gets it back together on the outside line, given just enough space to survive. But as all the drivers tiptoe the way through, Eduardo Royes and that Ferrari is looking absolutely ferocious already. 2 wide behind Noakes versus Katios, and Katios right now has got the bit between the teeth in the Corvette. He tries to force to move on. Can he get it done? Not quite, as they all cut the hill here, and everyone tries to survive the first time through. Eau Rouge into Radion, it's never easy, but as they all cut the hill, everyone's doing a fantastic job so far, and it does look as though all the drivers making the way up the hill comfortably. That's Casper Rotner all over the back of Alexander Wingmark. He's had a bit of a slow start as Rotner, but still some time to go, and as they head on to the Kemmel Straight, well, you can see there the spray, absolutely gargantuan. Indeed, visibility right now is going to be very poor. You've got to break into the spray of the next car in front and do it all muscle memory at this point, but as we do see everyone going down to the braking zone here, the fact that everyone seems to have survived, or at least the vast majority of the field have survived the opening sector. Well done to everyone. That is not easy whatsoever. But as they now make the way in towards the middle sector, now the fighting will begin as Jordan Butler finds himself a Spectra Feet SimWorks UK at the pressure from teammate Harry Sven. Albeit that's for 28 for the as they come down the hill, but plenty of fighting between them and so many a driver here. It does seem as though everyone now started to go into single file formation as we look to Hayden Young, and right now he's trying to put some pressure here on to Vincent Squibb. How he's got Jordan Maymar breathing all the way down his neck, and Maymar sliding sideways there as they come down in towards Pouhon Bend. But all these drivers right now, I think the full process for so many of them here is to try and make some early gains that they can, and right now Young on the inside of Vincent Squibb. Squibb goes a bit deep, that's Pouhon Bend. That's going to be the 7th place in the interclass. A smooth move being made there, and Matthew Croft tries to pick up the pieces just behind him as he passes Jordan Maymar, and they all go line and stern out into the next braking zone. But as Ashley Brooks, meanwhile, fights his way past Austin Graff there, just squeezed up past outside of our camera shot, and Austin Graff in the Axis SimSport Ferrari forward and back. Well, Graff's going to have a look round the outside now to Stablo 1. Can he make some magic happen happen here? The answer may be no, he can't, as Tom Wheeler just has to play it patiently. Now, Wheeler has got ahead of Stephen Wilkinson. Wilkinson had a bit slow start. SimRacing UK try. I suspect he's playing this one conservatively. And remember, he's the man who's returned to racing after what has been the best part of multiple decades being away from the grid and acting as team principal on the pit wall for SimRacing UK. And what his target was to achieve a couple of top 10s this season. He achieved the top 5 in his first round of the championship last time out. And we're here today. He's in a position to try and take a podium if he can. But meanwhile, speaking of trying to take a victory class, well, Thomas Noakes, he may have been able to beat Fotis Katios in qualifying and at the start of the race. But Katios right now coming back at him. And that's the thing with Katios. On the opening stint of a race, particularly the opening 20 minutes, he is literally like a moth to a candle flame. You cannot get him away from it. You try to swipe him away as much as possible, and he just dodges you. And right now, he wants that win as much as he possibly can. But one lap in, Eduardo Ruiz controls the pace up front in the interclass and overall ahead of Thomas Noakes, pro leader, just ahead of Fotis Katios. Then Jack Barker falling away for the top 3, but the Made for Racing drivers are looking calm, cool, consistent here. Second of Inter, ahead of club leader Marty Kenyon, who's 5th. Then we have Andrew Montine behind the Pit Racing driver in 6th. Then Tim Probet, third of pros, is 7th. Ahead of Max Wheeler and Archie Williams, all pro drivers, and Ashley Brooks complete your top 10. As they all head up the hill. Oh, hold up a second. That is Andrew Montine. He's gone sideways there for Rouge into Radion. And, well, the car coming completely loose. The Axis sort of Smurfs driver gets it wrong and now has to wait to rejoin. This is a very painful process. He's got to tiptoe the car into the right direction. Does that, and now he's just got to gradually feed the throttle in and rejoin offline as gently as he can, parallel to the racing line, and does so brilliantly. But look how many places it's got to. He's all the way down to the back end of the top 30. That's the way it goes, unfortunately. Andrew Montine, innocent mistake, but a big and costly one at that. But meanwhile, Brandon Vincent Square being attacked here by Matthew Croft. Front bumper coming off one of the cars there. Not quite sure what's happened, but we were missing the front bumper for a brief moment. I think there's been a bit of an incident, but meanwhile, oh, what's happened here? As they all come out to the right hand and turn of a second car runs wide there. That is Ashley Brooks being escorted out, as is Robin. No, in fact, that's Robin Powney taking a bit of a trip to play gravel and Soho Castles. And well, under braking out, some BMW, that's Mikey Stewart misses brake zone. Powney follows him off the road. And well, right now, I think a few drivers are getting a little bit enthusiastic and a little bit too eager, perhaps, and pushing too hard for the conditions. But the fight is building, and Powney will lose it out. And Austin Graff as well falling down to a degree. But I think we have had a couple of contacts, and well, there was that incident we're going to need an explanation of. But meanwhile, well, that's how you do Pouhon Bend. He's gone very wide there, and Max Wheeler for first so fast by Freewheeler Racing has somehow found his way all into the runoff area. And much like we did see Carl Roy have to rejoin earlier on in qualifying, Wheeler's having to do the same here in the race conditions. He does rejoin, but drops all the way down from what was an opportunity for top 3 in the pro class, now down to 7th place in the class and right to the back end of the top 10. But it does seem so a few tries being bitten here by Spa-Francorchamps, and well, understandably, as they all try to get it together, we will get a replay of some of the big moments in due course. But with all that happening further down the order, here's Matthew Massey, and well, he's in a bit of a lonely 7th place in club at the moment. He's clear of Littlewater, but in turn, Brotner's running away from him. Oh, that's Carl around behind. Who exactly is that going for a spin? That is our Acura, and that's the Acura there of none other than Max Galgay, who's gone around now. He's listed as being a lap down. I don't think that's accurate, to be fair. I think, well, something's gone very wrong for him. And the Split Straight Esports driver, who I think started from the pit lane, well, that's why he's listed as a lap down, but he will gradually be brought onto the lead lap as time goes on. But still, the Acura driver getting things righted there when it went so wrong. But of course, mistakes can happen. Oh my good lord! And there's been a big incident there coming out of Blanchimont Bend. The field's coming down, cars rolling out the way if they can. And Austin Graff in the heart of that. Mikey Stewart as well being caught up. Stewart trying to rejoin gradually. He's on the grass there in the BMW. And Exorcist will try this point. He's going to commit to Rallycross. He's not rejoining the bus stop chicane. He's going to rejoin on the exit of it instead. There is no way back on. In fact, he's going to the pit lane. Grant Miller, meanwhile, now catches up, but just in front of him, it's almost free wireless. Anton Kalo, the MK SimSport Flying Finn, right now doing everything he can to move onwards towards a win. But he's going to go defensive here versus Montaigne, who's trying to fight his way back up after his moment over Eau Rouge on the previous lap. And then there's Jordan Butler watching on behind, but the rain is still falling here. But this circuit, you can definitely see by the streaks at the moment, the rain is topping up the circuit. It's not making it that much wetter compared to qualifying, although I think our drivers would disagree with me on that one. These are changeable conditions at best, but right now, definitely it's proving to be a moderately wet circuit, and everyone is just trying to figure out there what's the best line. As there's a car into the barrier there, that's the Porsche of Daniel Payes, who's got to the barrier, rejoins, and well, the old dudes of cars, vintage car, I don't know if you can call that a vintage car anymore. I think you can call it a wrecked classic at this point as it comes on down. But meanwhile, just in front, well, plenty of fight going on. Grant Miller and Hendrik Zilka side by side, and Miller on the inside here trying to take back what will be 23rd. Zilka tries to hang around the outside to inside. That's not going to work, and Casper Rotten and Dan Sharp will queue up with them. Indeed, there is plenty going on inside the midfield, and meanwhile at the very front of the field, Fotis Katsios has taken the lead off of Eduardo Royce. Thomas Noakes was all over the back of him before that happened, so we're going to need a replay of what's happened there. And Jack Barker, meanwhile, is being swarmed by Martin Kenyon, so Kenyon now all over the back of him. And, well, it does seem as though here Kenyon's now find a bit of pace. Perhaps he's starting to feel in that Lamborghini that the pace is coming to him quite naturally here, as Barker just taking it very carefully out of the fender chicane. You can see Kenyon here, he's got about 2 to 3 tenths in a sector on Barker, so Barker taking it light, and the only thing I can imagine here, that's mid-rear drive for you, but Kenyon, well, he can barely see the corners with the spray. And remember, we're sat in the middle of the car. We're not sat from the driver's side, which is even worse, and a lot of oversteer there, loses traction on the exit of curve Paul Ferrier, and as a result, Barker will pull away. So I think Barker at the moment just playing it safe. He's turned the traction control up to maximum most likely, and also he's just taking his time out the corners. He isn't as quick, but what he is doing is proving to be a very frustrating driver. He's legally allowed to take his time. Indeed, if he's driving safe and he's not driving dangerously, then Kenyon's got the responsibility to overtake him. That's racing. But right now, here comes Tim Probert trying to show this is racing as well, as the Send It Racing driver lives up to the team name, sends it on the inside, and, well, gets the move there. Kenyon doesn't fight it too hard, understandably, because it's a pro driver blasting a club driver, so why would you fight it that hard? Now, Jack Barker will be the next target, although I don't think Barker is playing to defend, to be fair. I think he's just trying to hold his line, and we expect Kenyon to have to do the hard work, as Probert sets the fastest lap of the race, a 2-minute 40.11, and we'll put that in perspective, that is 4 tenths faster than anybody else out there at the moment, so our McLaren driver is definitely finding some time that others are still yet to find as they go on to lap number 4. But oh, hold up a second, who on earth's on their roof? Well, that's not the way it goes. That's Sight Anthony. How on earth has he managed that? And, well, we'll have to find out very shortly in regards to Sight Anthony. And, well, I hope he's all okay. But meanwhile, Alexander Vingmark making his way onwards there. We picks up the pieces where Anthony has lost them. It's all full of the pieces for him. And, well, he's got Daniel Pace right behind him, but 2 different drivers of 2 different classes there. And, well, John Butler just up the road there. That's Vingmark's target. Butler making steady progress after a bit of a slow start. So he's on a bit of recovery right now for Spectra Feet Simworks UK. He's missed the front bumper as well. I think there's a bit of a story to that one. Need a replay of that, although I'm very hesitant to pull away, ladies and gents, because if anybody remembers the Thursday race in the Superstars earlier in the week, you remember the fact that as soon as we cut to a replay, absolute pandemonium played out live every time. So in the end, we were more replay than we were live. But still, Stephen Wilkinson giving up a place there to Matthew Croft, and I think, again, that's all tactical for Stephen Wilkinson. He just wants to focus on finishing the race in the club class, and whatever it's going to be, podium, top 5 or top 10, as long as he finishes the race, that's the most important part, because to finish first you must finish, as they say. But meanwhile, Brandon Vincent Squibb all on the back of Hayden Young. These two right now, they're biting time out of each other. Although Vincent Squibb goes deep, he goes deeper, and in the end, he has to let Jordan Maymar go. And that's not a trip he wanted, as he makes his way through the left-hander of turn number 9 at Expend. And Vincent Squibb right now eager, but the problem is that Ford Mustang does not like these conditions. Meanwhile, Tim Probert going around the outside to inside there. My good lord, on Jack Barker for fourth place. And Probert's finding the grip that McLaren right now is absolutely dialed in. I wonder whether the 312 team have decided to set this car up to focus on the wet conditions, and they've essentially said, whilst we do have rain and a wet circuit for most likely the open hour of the race, keep in mind if the rain does stop around 35 to 40 minutes into the race, which is what we're expecting, he therefore is going to be driving on a drying circuit. Got that the wrong way round, but he got it right the second time round. And the point being that Probert right now will have all the pace until the circuit starts to turn towards what will be a damp or greasy circuit, and then he'll start to lose out quite dramatically, even on slick tyres. But I think that's what they've gone for here in the McLaren. They're deciding maximise your wet time, because the circuit is never going to be truly dry until the very closing stages, and therefore you can make up a lot of time. John Harley being passed there by Peter Holt, who started from the back of the field. Harley did the same, and, well, swap of the places there between the two Mercedes drivers, but Harley now trying to come back. I think the Spectra Racing Feet Murby driver from down under, well, right now not quite able to make a move, and instead having to wait. Holt moving up into 30th place there in the interclass. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a look back at some of the big moments from the start of the race, and we are going to begin with none other than it all going a bit wrong for none other than what was Sight Anthony. And here we go with your replays. So this is how it went wrong for Sight Anthony and Peter as they left the pits, both of them making the way on out there, and I think on pit exit, perhaps just having to wait their turn. And as they came on out, Holt tried to get the power down, and, well, in fact, now they all made it safely out the pit lane, so I think that's a bit of a glitch, but that just proves they started from the pit, as did Max Galgay. So as they got started, well, then things did go a bit wrong for a few drives, including this on lap number 2 for Andrew Montaigne. This was the man who at the time was running right towards the front of the field, and where it all went sideways through Eau Rouge, and by the time he got to Radion, he was almost in the wrong direction, but thankfully got it stopped before it went completely around. David Pilcher, however, simultaneously had this to happen to him. This was going down towards the source, and as the SimClass racing driver went on to the brakes, well, hard on the brakes he was in the BMW, and a bit of a tap there from the Acura of Galgay. The split track eastward stride just turned him around. It was seen based on that camera angle, and well, a bit unfortunate. I'm sure they'll talk about that one afterwards. Tom Wheeler had a bit of a nightmare moment as well on lap number 2. This was going through Les Communs Malmedy, and we'll try to go around the inside of the Corvette in front, and in the end came into contact, and well, unfortunately went wrong, and that's what triggered the big scene of the incident. That was actually Brooks being turned there by the contact with Tom Wheeler, and everyone had to try and thread the needle. Austin Graff being the one who came right into the scene of that. This is what it looked like from on board Graff's car. He's going to see all this play out in front of him very shortly. Goes to turn in his Ferrari along the outside already, then suddenly there goes Ashley Brooks, and there's a guy, and he gets biffed sideways there as somebody was trying to take evasive action themselves. So Graff unfortunately in the wrong place at the right time to be knocked around like a ping pong ball. Robin Pouhon, meanwhile, had a bit of difficulty as he came through that sequence as well, and this was coming through turn number 7, and at this moment the Corvette driver just went wide there. He was trying to go around the outside of BMW. That's Mikey Stewart trying to fight and ran out of road to make the fight happen. We then had this big moment for none other than what was Ryan Clark towards the end of lap number 2. And this was coming in towards Blanchimont Bend. And as he went in, Mercedes driver here, there's going to be a big incident. There's a car parked up already there. That's a Corvette that's decided to have a bit of a nap. And, well, trying to get it going. And a Wheeler in the end, taking it easy coming through there. So I think, well, in fact, several cars off the road. Not quite sure what's happened. And this was Mikey Stewart, meanwhile, as he made his way into the sequence. And as he did so, oh, that explains it being collected there. And, well, Robin Pouhon being collected as well. So that is the proof of what exactly has gone wrong. So can we see it from Robin Pouhon's perspective? We might be able to. So it had already gone wrong for one of our drivers just in front, and it triggered a chain reaction. So that was an Aston Martin that had it go wrong. Couldn't quite see who that was. Robin Pouhon got caught up there in the madness that played out. So that was the disaster for so many drivers, and that's why so many were taking it so easy going into there. But then some of you might be wondering what exactly happened to Cy Anthony. Well, it was at the same corner a lap later, and well, we'd already had one driver go off the road in the rear of the picture, but Cy Anthony came through, and in the end, well, went sent around the outside. Well, he tried to go around the outside of a wayward Porsche, but it all went wrong for him. He hit the gravel trap, and the car rolled onto its roof like that. And well, for Cy Anthony, a nightmare moment, and well, you could not make that up. And well, simultaneously, James Connolly, he had this happen to him all the way back at the Fangers chicane. And well, for Connolly, he just went into the braking zone, carried way too much speed and enthusiasm, and in the end, well, my goodness, that's one way of definitely keeping it on the road there. Mounted the curb and somehow four-wheeling it back on. I've never seen that from a Ferrari going through the Fangers chicane, but James Connolly definitely didn't make it the first of things. And well, there's a reason why he's got the nickname of the Doctor in tribute to Valentino Rossi, and there he was definitely the Doctor of keeping that on the road. But unfortunately for Ashley Brooks, things did not stay on the road. This was your Corvette driver who had already been knocked about for AB Designs and made his way up the hill. The rear of the car let go into Eau Rouge and Radion and did his own recreation of what happened to Andre Montine 2 laps earlier, but that was on lap number 4. And we had this for Grant Miller on lap number 4 as well. Bringing our replays to an end, and Miller made his way in towards Pouhon Bend, and the rear of the car just simply said no, went sideways, carried on the drift, and unfortunately could not stop the slow spin from being completed there, and went the full 270 degrees around, but able to get it back on the road eventually. But with that, it's back to your live racing we come, ladies and gentlemen, albeit not before we take a look at how Fotis Katios took the lead of the race. And this was Katios attacking. Eduardo Royes had a really good run going through Radion and then onto the Kimmel Straight. It was a drag race. He'd already made his way past Thomas Noakes. Unfortunately, won't be getting a replay of that. But Royes in the end defending to the inside and not really putting up too much of a wall there, respecting the fact 2 different classes and they just want to survive the race and take wins in their respective classes. But with that, it's back to your live racing. And as we do come on back, we'll definitely a lot of drama on the opening few laps, but to be fair as well, it's some absolutely brilliant racing. It can't be taken away from anybody. Now, has anything really changed since we've been away for the best part of 10 minutes? Well, Hayden Young is still fighting his way up the order, albeit that's Jordan Maymar coming and past. And in fact, Stephen Wilkinson has been passed by Jordan Maymar. Wilkinson is now down to 3rd in your club class. So we show you the class standings. And Maymar's up into 2nd, so trying to chase down Martin Kenyon. Hayden Young, meanwhile, continues his crusade. He's broken away from Vincent Squibb. His next target is Tom Cordy. And a shout out to this man for Phoenix Racing Red. He's made a lot of progress in this race. He's very steadily moving forwards and chased after Jack Barker, who now is the best part of 6.5 seconds up the road, and he is steadily closing in on him. Further down the order, well, David Young and Ryan Clark. Here is Clark right now, the Spectre Racing driver, trying to chase down 7th place in club. And we're looking for a prime opportunity perhaps to get involved. Albeit John Hardy behind, the man who started from the very back of the field. And right now, almost with him there, they're 31st and 32nd, the two Spectre Racing cars in the green and black liveries. As we do see David Young going very deep there into the bus stop chicane. Gets it back together in the end, but the logistical nightmare of racing drive. They've had a bit of a nightmare there, the logistics trying to get that car turned. I think Clark is going to power past. Yes, he is. I don't think Young's going to have a response here until the source. Not because he doesn't want to, but because that BMW's got no momentum, given the mistake he made at the bus stop chicane. And Ryan Clark now moves up another place there. Straightforward move, but we'll have to wait and see whether Young has a response a bit later on. But indeed, we still have plenty of drivers out there. 49 drivers were registered to attend today, and we do currently have the best part of 44 still running, if my numbers are correct. Meanwhile, whilst all that's going on, Matthew Croft will hold up a second. There's something not right, and the reason that is because we've got Martin Kenyon falling down the overall order, and that is going to be Jordan Maymar closing up on him now. So Kenyon's had a bit of an off there at Expend, and suddenly it's all going a bit backwards for the Pistec Racing driver. Well, to understand what's happened to him very shortly. As the Englishman makes his way around, we're not even 20 minutes into this race, and suddenly things are already spinning on their head. I think they're going to have a bit more drama before this race is done, as he looks like the inside of Tom Cordy there, and Kenyon goes in way too hot and makes contact to the side of Cordy's car. That's going to be Jordan Maymar taking the club lead, but Kenyon in the end, enthusiasm 100%, but unfortunately I think mistiming out on the brakes, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was a puddle of water on the inside, which he's hit under braking. Unfortunately for Kenyon, well, he wanted the place back, but it's now cost him even more because Stephen Wilkinson will be catching up to the damaged Lamborghini, and I don't suspect Kenyon's going to be coming into the pits at the moment. I think the car's got away with it, although question mark there for the driver he came into contact with as to whether their car's going to be okay. But right now it's definitely Stephen Wilkinson who's on a bit of a mission, as Harry Seven is behind. And Seven, who started towards the back of the field, he's had a really good run of this race so far for Spectre Racing. Pete Murby up into 6th in the interclass. Now there's more work to be done out there, but still the work he's done thus far cannot be understated. But as Luke Sherlock's had a bit of a moment, and the Darkwing Racing car's gone around at Pouhon Bend by the looks of things, well, the Ford Mustang gets pointed back on the straight and narrow, but that's definitely a bit of a bruiser. Oh, hold up a second. What on earth's going on here? That's Sharples. That's also Matthew Massey being collected. We've also got there, I believe, that's the Ford Mustang of Ryan Littleboy. They've all been collected. They come back together, and as they do, we're taking the race action. That's Jake Muttett trying to go up the inside a little more. Squeezes wound past Robin Powney as well. Well, definitely more mistakes being made from a few drivers. And we're going to start getting some replays of those incidents very shortly. But as Jake Muttett right now creams his wound past, or cruises wound past Robin Powney and Darren Sharples. Well, Darren Sharples in particular, heavy wounded car there. Misses his rear wing, misses his front bumper and splitter as well. The old dude's in car's amnesia. Definitely right now having a bit of a moment to forget perhaps. But I don't think he might have been at the root cause of it. We'll have to wait and see. As Ryan Littlemore's car right now is completely broken on the front axle. He's trying to get it home. And we'll understand, we give now how close he is to the pit lane entry point right now. He doesn't want to tow, but he's got to be very careful here because he's still got to get into the pit lane. And the fact of the matter is, if he does end up triggering an instant, not saying he will, but the stewards will definitely come down a lot harder on him because the argument will be, well, you should have towed if you can't drive the car. But right now he's going to try, as you do see there, James Conley and Matthew Massey waiting very patiently. Good awareness on both drivers there. I understand. I think that Massey might be a little bit annoyed at Conley for that one, given the fact he won't have realised what was going on, and then suddenly he'll realise as Littlemore's car peels away to the pit lane. Well done by everybody there. That definitely deserves a round of applause for that, because not many drivers will do that. They'll have the patience to react to what's going on, but James Conley there in particular really reacting well, and Massey doing a brilliant job. Although at the time, I wouldn't be surprised if he was probably saying, what on earth is Conley doing in front of me? And then realising, it's for a damaged car, we've got to let it go. So everyone coming out of that with flying colours, but meanwhile, right now trying to fly his way out the inside of Stephen Wilkinson, and doing so is Harry Seven, the Spectre Racing Feet Murby driver, being clever with that. Up the inside into Pouhon Bend, another place gained. Now, in terms of places that are getting a bit of nip and tuck, there's Matthew Croft. He's a bit lonely in 9th place overall, 7th in Pro. Tom Cordy, meanwhile, he's in 3rd in the Interclass. Needs to bring Cole Roy, Jordan Maymar and Hayden Young along with him for the ride. So therefore, Cordy and Young, they're definitely going to be getting enticed into each other. And Hayden Young right now is the one to watch out for, because whilst he may not have the pace of the top two in Inter, with Jack Barker and Eduardo Royce really flying out there at the moment, well, he's definitely quicker than Cordy to the tune of a second a lap at the moment. The Sendit Racing driver is really starting to build up some momentum, and well, a monumentous occasion could be coming. as he looks to give chase. Well, for the moment, we take a quick look back at what's happened, particularly how Martin Kenyon slipped down the ranks after a bit of an error at X bend only moments ago. So this was Martin Kenyon in the lead of the club class, much ahead of his rivals. Went very deep there at X, went to the gravel, and at that point, no grip on the rear tyres, and the car just simply swerved on the round, and he had to very gradually get it turned back around. The worst kind of mistake you could make, and Jordan Maymar in the end, a long way back. That gives you an idea of the gap. That's where Maymar was when it went wrong for Kenyon. He was just making his way down into Ravage Bend. But then we also did have this big moment for Darren Sharples, and this was on the latter half of lap number 7. Coming out of Stavlo 1, trying to go around the outside there of a Mercedes driver, and a bit of contact between the two of them, so Sharples did get slightly elbowed out, and then the car came loose, collected the Spectra Racing at BMW, and then it was the Ryan Littlebore machine, the Ford Mustang, that came into the scene in the instant. I think that was Massey being collected by Sharples' car already out of control, and well, this is what it looked like on board with Ryan Littlebore. Now, he won't have seen the yellow flag here. There wouldn't have been a yellow flag call. It would have been too late. But he'd already lost it through the corner before, and I think he might have reacted. Now, I don't think we could see the car Sharples on the left there in the camera. I think that's what he reacted to, and the rear of the car came loose, and that explains it for him. And then just trying to get the car together for the rest of the drive. We also had this for Kyle Roy off camera, meanwhile. This was then up into Eau Rouge and Radion, and more up the hill. And the third driver to fall victim to Eau Rouge today, albeit 10 out of 10 for 300. No, he doesn't get a 10 out of 10 there. He gets 8 out of 10 because he couldn't quite get it pointed back in the straight line, but he did avoid the tyre barrier there. So good work from Kyle Roy to make sure it did not go to the tyre barriers. That could definitely have been a bit of a bruiser, but indeed just keeping it together very nicely. And well, we also had this moment for Max Galgay moments later. And this was your Acura driver trying to look for a move on what was, he was looking for a move into Blanchimont Bend, and it completely came loose and went round and around and around. And thankfully not going up onto its roof like Slight Ansley's car, but into that gravel trap he went, and then had to very gradually bring it back onto the road. Oh, goodness me, as Eduardo Royce in the end had to back off completely on quarter exit. That was a bit of a hairy moment for both of them. But back to your live racing we go, ladies and gentlemen. And as we do come back, well, we're almost at the half an hour complete mark. We've still got plenty of racing in this one. And plenty of excitement still to come, and that excitement's never too far away. Speaking of which, here's Archie Williams and Max Wheeler together as they battle for 6th place overall. And as they come out of the final corner for this lap to go on to lap number 10, well, you can see Jack Barker's close behind, and Barker on the previous lap set the fastest lap in the interclass. So Barker has started to pick up the pace versus Eduardo Royce at 2 minute 39.99. But as Max Wheeler looking on the offensive there, that McLaren has got so much quarter potential compared to the Mercedes. But of course, we're seeing the opposite end of the spectrum now, which is that as we ride on board, looking down the front end of the 333, if that Mercedes is able to get a really good run out of a quarter, it can suddenly just bolt away. Wheeler backing off there with the spray. Of course, this camera situated on the roof of the car, looking down over the front. Well, there is at the front of the McLaren 720S Evo. Well, Max Wheeler right now will have a lot less visibility, but that spray gets more and more prominent here. But now looking to the outside, that's Williams going defensive here as he heads onto the brakes. And Wheeler right now trying to think about outside to inside. Does he go for it? The answer is no. He just waits a little bit, and well, understandably. But whilst this battle is going on, well, we're hearing that Jack Barker's had a bit of a moment just behind. We're going to get a replay of that shortly, because suddenly that is going to promote several drives up the order. Barker has returned. However, I somehow get the feeling that as we see it come out of the spray, it's a wounded Aston Martin. It's going to be passed by Hayden Young looking up the inside. Young is going to go for it for third place, but Barker loses the rear of the car, and Young in the end just puts the brakes on. Oh, going straight on, there's Martin Kenyon. He decides, right, I'll take the escape road here. He's going to sacrifice himself, picking up a slowdown penalty for breaking track limit. But to be fair to Martin Kenyon, I think that's the right call to make there. He loses an instant point and also picks up a slowdown, but the reverse is true in the fact that he avoids being collected by a wayward car. Not saying that Jack Barker would collect him, but in that situation, sometimes you've got to make a sacrifice in order to stay safe, and that's exactly what Kenyon's done. But Jack Barker right now gets it back together. And as he does so, well, the made for racing driver there, the car doesn't seem to have any damage on it, but I suspect that his mood has been damaged a little bit by that. Indeed, every time you make a mistake in the wet, you really do start to panic mentally, just for the simple reason that once it goes wrong once, you suddenly start questioning yourself. Did I get on the throttle too soon? Was I using the wrong gears? Have I got the setup right of the car? Am I reacting to the conditions correctly? You ask yourself so many questions, and you can't do that as a driver. If a mistake happens, you've literally just got to nail it down and go, right, that happened, so what? On to the next moment. And speaking of the next moment, moment here. Well, Archie Williams and Max Wheeler together. Wheeler having a much better run out of the Stablo 1 and 2 complex. And now Williams going defensive again in towards Blanchimont Ben. Wheeler wanting this in earnest as we are fastest lap race now. Tim Probert a 2-minute 38.71. He's flying out there. He's now matching the leader, Akatios, practically lap for lap. And Williams defending well enough there versus Wheeler for now. But it does seem as though the Australian driver under a lot of pressure here. And for Max Wheeler, well, that McLaren looking so good in the wet conditions at the moment, but it could all change a bit later. Meanwhile, Brandon Vincent Squibb trying to pass Barker for fourth place in the interclass. They've got Harry Seven closing up on them little by little as well. So he wants a role to play in the lime green Mercedes AMG. As all these drivers head onwards, well, meanwhile, Hayden Young is disappearing up the road in third place in the interclass. Happy with that. Tom Cordy as well, further up the distance. And, well, battles are still to play out. Further back, Ryan Clark missing the front bumper, the same as John Butler there as they head in towards the next braking zone. And, well, I don't think Spectrafeet SimWorks UK came to the grid with their cars missing front bumpers, although the fact that we see both cars there together, minus front bumper and splitter, that's just a pure coincidence, I promise you, ladies and gents, but a comical coincidence, you should say, although not for these drivers, of course, for the fact they won't be too pleased with the way things have gone, and they'll be hoping for things to be much more straightforward as the race goes on. Now, the good news, of course, is they do have a fast repair available to them when they come into the pit lane, so they can get those bits put back on. They've given all their team and pit crew members instant coffee rations, and therefore it does, I mean, they're going to be able to repair those cars very quickly. But understandably, right now, that's not the way they wanted to go at all. As meanwhile, Hayden Young, he thinks about a move here on Martin Kenyon, or is it Martin Kenyon and Hayden Young? In fact, it's the other way round. Kenyon has just passed Hayden Young, going through at La Source to Eau Rouge and Radion, and Young just tucking in behind. But with that in mind, we take a quick look back as Kenyon gets it very sideways there. In fact, we don't go back straight away. In fact, we do now because he does get it together there. And we do take a look back to Mikey Stewart, who's looking for a move on David Young, the Access Sim Sport Sim Coach driver. The inside, and Young lets that go, and Stewart goes around the outside, and David Young into the pit lane. Well, hold up a second. I did not notice that. He's missing the entire rear boot space of that BMW M4 Evo, and, well, not quite sure what's happened there. For the 129 driver right now, that car's definitely missing a lot of parts, and not the right ones to be missing either, as he makes his way into the pit lane. And, well, his first half an hour of racing definitely brought to an abrupt halt. Hold up, that's the car parked up there. Who's that parked up? I couldn't quite tell, but that's the car parked, and that might be the machine of, I wonder, is that going to be Jason Brennan who's parked up there? Or somebody's definitely parked themselves on the exit of the endurance pit lane. And, well, it's gone a bit wrong for somebody, but not quite sure whom. But that car waiting there at the moment and waiting to rejoin. Off the racing line, thankfully, so all safe it would seem. As well, that's got on the grass there, gradually make its way forward, and I believe that is Jason Brennan. We can confirm it's Brennan's Mercedes, and we'll say something very wrong going up Eau Rouge and Radion, and we're just trying to get it back on the road. But Andrew Mateen on the inside of John Harley, now into 12th place there in the interclass. That's coming out of Rivage Bend. So the Access Sim Sport Smurf driver, after his early spin, right now gradually getting things back together little by little, but he's still got a long way to go. And his pace right now proving to be a little bit of a prickling point with regards to the fact he's just matching those in front of him. He's not surpassing them. But Harvey Wheeler, oh, hold up a second. Harvey Wheeler's missing his rear wing. The Aversa Rapid by Freewheeler racing car right now damaged. Immediately fast repair on, but he did miss his pit box as well, and he's back out. So Harvey Wheeler decided not to put any fuel in the car, just literally the fast repair and go. So something's gone very wrong for Harvey Wheeler, albeit Max Wheeler right now chasing after this man, Archie Williams still. So it does seem as though the Wheeler family, on the one hand, having success, on the other hand, well, having some difficulty, but it's all chop and change for so many drivers. But here comes Max Wheeler, looking to the inside on the left of your picture, in his McLaren right now, and on the inside of Archie Williams, who's to the right, but Williams outbrakes him. But does he brake a bit too far? The answer is no. Archie Williams right now absolutely nailing down this defense, doing a brilliant job, albeit, of course, these two fighting means the top four will gradually have gone away to the tune of 21 seconds, but they're fighting for position now and going down the hill in towards Rivage Bend. The three-wheeler racer McLaren does not go for it there. The door was slightly open, but I think even Max Wheeler knows you don't go for some moves, and that's one you don't go for. Lunging up the inside of Rivage Bend when you've got so much water, because all the water will be gathering on the entry to the inside of the corner rather than the outside. It rolls down, it rolls across the corner to head to the drains on the outside, if I remember correctly, and therefore you don't want to be on the inside line. You'll essentially aquaplane the front right tyre, and at that point your braking distance will be doubled. Right now, Archie Williams keeping it together very nicely here as they come down through Pouhon Bend. And, well, it's definitely a demonstration. If you can tame the power of that Mercedes, even in these wet conditions, it could go well. Harvey Wheeler, meanwhile, with his rear wing repaired. He's come out behind Carl Roy, and now he's back ahead of the Scotsman. Roy there just simply tucking in behind in the Corvette. And Harvey Wheeler sneaking his way out the inside. You can see the car snapping loose there for Ravage Bend. That's that water that he had to transfer over. Really almost catching the rear of the car out, but just about keeping it pointed straight. And Hayden Young Hughes on the back of this, looking to get involved once again when he can. As these drivers make the way around, and we make our way back in time to the replays that we said we were going to bring you, starting with what exactly happened to Jack Barker only moments ago on lap number 10. So this was Barker making his way down, and well, this was the spin, which was after his initial incident. So this was the spin at Lacombe, and it does not look as though he was touched there by the machinery of Hayden Young, and I think Young just taking evasive action and stopping the car. But before that, this happened to Barker. This is the most important part. Well, he got it wrong coming out of Eau Rouge into Radion in the end, and well, we need a bit earlier than that, and I think we are about to get it. Here we go. This is where it went wrong. So he was chasing after Max Wheeler at the time, took a bit of the exit curve, took a lot of the exit curve with the spray blinding him, and went straight on into the barrier there. And well, that Aston Martin with some damage to it, that's not going to be a happy car. But in the end, was able to get it turned around, but not without a degree of difficulty. So that's what happened to Barker, and we had this for Martin Kenyon as he made his way onwards. And this is what he would have seen as he came into the corner. You've seen Barker's gone sideways. They thought, right, you know what? Straight onto the runoff area, get it to the further runoff area, then to the grass, just rally across your way across the road. But then we did have this for David Pilcher. This is where it went a little bit wrong for him, coming out of the pit lane. Well, in fact, he was rejoining the race there. I think this might be a glitch with our software as he made his way out of the pit lane there. All looked okay. So I think that might just be where he's rejoining the races. So Pilcher still going. And meanwhile, we did have this for David Young. And this may explain why he was missing all the trunk space in his BMW M4. Went around, rolled backwards, and in the end, well, great reactions there from Jordan Butler. And well, Young reversed into the barrier. That explains the damage he picked up and why the rear was missing of the car. But well done to Jordan Butler there. That was not easy to get that car stopped in time, but he just about did it. And we had this little moment for Cole Roy. And this was where things went a bit wrong for the Scotsman. And he rolled his way on through Blanchimont Bend, went around, rolled backwards. And well, evasive action being taken there by the BMW Jordan Maymar. And well, Carl Roy rubber banded his way back to the barrier on the outside. And then bounced his way back onto the road as Kenyon and Barker went their way around. And also there, we did see Hayden Young just squeeze his way around the outside. In fact, no, he did not, as in the end, Carl Roy got his defence on and said to Hayden Young, no, 2's the limit, not 3. And we're just about able to make sure that he didn't lose any more oval positions. And then we did have a little bit of a moment for Grant Miller just before we cut back. And this was on lap number 11, when the Phoenix Racing Red Dry came into the bus stop chicane. It came in full tilt. Was it the right amount of tilt? The answer was no. The rear of the car just slightly said no. Got it stopped, however, and made sure it did not go all the way around. So great reactions from him. And with that, back to your live race we go, ladies and gentlemen. And as we do come back, well, we are now into the final hour. The rain seems to have stopped, at least on some of our camera angles it's finally stopped. And with that, well, could we now see the nature of the racing take a turn? Because, of course, the circuit will begin to gradually dry. And whilst we may have lost a couple of cars on the way, we have had several retirements, including from St. Anthony, Ryan Littlemore, Jason Brennan, Robin Pownett, Steve Hughes, Casper Brotner, Anton Kalo, and also Ashley Brooks, and non-starts Darren Giacomelli and Kieran Davidson. We still do have 39 runners out there, and 39 GT3s will be laying down quite a bit of track heat, and therefore they will gradually be displacing and boiling away the water. So we'll have to see what happens there, and will we get to a point at some point in this race where the slick transition is required? Now the problem is, of course, if we are seeing the circuit in its current state, I would say the slicks are only going to be viable when we get to around 30 to 20 minutes remaining. Again, this is just a theoretical prediction. Don't take my word as gospel, ladies and gentlemen. But based on the camera angles available to me, I would say we're not going to be seeing slicks for at least another 20 minutes. So therefore, then the question becomes, can a driver make the fuel tank last a whole hour? Now, these fuel tanks, the 70% fuel tank in dry conditions, so we saw at the Hockenheim ring, will last up to around 45 minutes. And given the fact we've been driving in the wet, the fuel life will have been made quite a bit longer. So 60 minutes should be doable, but you're going to have to do quite a lot of fuel saving as part of that to be able to make sure those 60 minutes are comfortable. Perhaps you may have to go a little bit longer, but as the drivers cover through, Luke Sherlock, meanwhile, he's gone wide there. That's at Stablo 2. And, well, as we do see your race leaders make the well pass. Sherlock dropping down the order. In fact, no, that's Austin Graff coming to pass there. So that's not your race leaders. Well, I think Luke Sherlock at this rate may be at risk of going down a lap very shortly. As there's Fotis Gatios. And, well, there is your race leader making his way on past there. So, Luke Sherlock goes down a lap. We'll get through an error. But, meanwhile, Eduardo Royes, your leader in the Interclass, I think he's made a mistake at Pouhon Bend because that car's not looking to be at full tilt at the moment. And he's fallen away for the top 3 overall. That's your top 3 of pro drivers now, and he's lost a lot of time. So I think Royes has fallen into an error, but he's not fallen into the clutches of second place Interdrive Tom Cordy. The Phoenix Racing red driver still carrying on in second place. Jack Barker a bit further behind. Who's that going sideways? Is that Jordan Maymar? It is Maymar. Your club leader gets it wrong. Look who's going behind him. There's Martin Kenyon. Kenyon's going to retake the club lead. So Kenyon made a mistake. Now Maymar's made one. Well, even the very best out there are no strangers to making errors. And with Jordan Maymar right now, this is the Hockenheim ring all over again. Albeit the mistake this time isn't a pit entry. It's exiting Pouhon Bend, and a white line catching him out once again. Those white painted lines there, they denote the track limits in terms of the edge of the circuit. What they also do is offer you much less grip. It is paint rather than solid tarmac that you're driving on, and well, that paint's not just there for show. It will cause the car to slide as Maymar sliding again. Now the only thing I can think of here as well, perhaps those wet tyres are starting to ache a little bit, given the fact they have been driven on for the best part of 40 minutes almost now. And Jack Barker's going to try and make a move here on Maymar. He wants that overall position back to Made for Racing Drive. He thinks he can chase down the top 3, or at least the top 2 we should say, 'cause he is third place in Inter, but he can chase after them either way. But the Made for Racing driver here, who we ride on board with, well, at this point, as he comes into that braking zone for the bus stop chicane, he's got too much spray in front of him. Although that spray does dissipate, of course, once they get to lower speeds. It's really once you head upwards to 90 miles an hour that it does really start to become prominent. You see that here as he powers on. Maymar having a very slow run coming out the bus stop chicane. And at this point, well, I think Barker there had to lift off and throw the car to the outside. I think he was just a bit too close there to power through. Well, looking around the outside now through La Source. It's brave from Barker. This is what you need, and that's why he's one of your Inter drivers side by side here as I head towards Eau Rouge and Radion. Now, will he be allowed to take the place? Yes, he will. I don't think Maymar lifted there. I think Barker's just outpowered him. And as they come through Eau Rouge and Radion, Barker now up to 10th place overall. On the rise, runs a little bit wide there by design for Eau Rouge to make sure he does not touch the water inside the uphill right-hander. And the third bottle job machine, as you can see the initials on the side, SBJ, that's what it stands for, his username. Now making its way up towards turn number 5. And for those asking, where does that username come from? Well, I promise you he's not a Tottenham or an Arsenal supporter, ladies and gentlemen. If you follow your football, you'll know for this season what exactly is going on there. And, well, meanwhile, as we do see Harry Saverne going on around, the Spectra Racing at Feet Murby driver getting a bit wrong there, coming on through. What was the Rouge and Radion, and the 207 driver, well, right now definitely having a bit of a moment. We'll try and get a replay of that when we can, and also replay what happened to Jordan Maymar. But the battles right now seem to be more still with the circuit, as Luke Sherlock literally in the same place as when we last looked at him. That's where he's gone off again. Darkwing Racing driver at Stablo 2. Stablo 2 and Luke Sherlock right now are definitely not a happy marriage. And what I understand, the British driver at this point, I think, will not want to touch that corner anymore, but he's going to have to keep going through that corner if he wants to see the checker flag of this race. Meanwhile, oh, Mikey Stewart, that car's in pieces. The Axis Sport Simcoach driver. This is a very big far cry from what we saw in the season opener. And right now for Mikey Stewart, well, can he get that car to the pit lane? It does not look healthy at all. He doesn't want to tie it if he can help it, because he's so close to pit entry at this point. He's literally only 200 metres away, and he's going to creep onwards as James Connolly is into the pits. Now, for the Team UKSimRacing Norris driver, is this a gamble to go to slicks early? If it is, I think this is a big gamble. I don't think so. I think this is a drive-through penalty. I think instant points are now started to take their toll for several drivers. And Connolly, definitely that is a drive-through he's serving. Meanwhile, Mikey Stewart comes in, and that will not be a drive-through. It will be repair work to the car. And if there is a drive-through added onto that, well, it's going to be a real kick in the teeth for the 233 driver, who right now is not having a happy day in the office whatsoever. But meanwhile, at the opposite end of the spectrum, a driver right now who I think has got the biggest Cheshire Cat grin on his face, Fotis Gatios. I can tell you one thing about Fotis, and the Split Track Esports team will back you up on this. The Greek driver here, whether it's sunshine, rain, thunder, he just wants to be out of the circuit, and he will just keep frying the car as that's round there for the Mercedes behind. And that's a mistake there for none other than your driver of, I do believe, Ryan Clark, having it go completely on a round on him. He was a lap down, but unfortunately Ryan Clark, that's going more backwards than forwards at this point. He's definitely going to try and get that car reasserted at some point. From there, well, as Katios carries on, Tom Cordy, meanwhile, has lost second place in the Interclass. He's been involved in a mistake of his own. Jack Barker's back into second, and Archie Williams versus Max Wheeler. They'll still enjoying a good old fight as they come onwards. Hold up, that's Thomas Noakes. Thomas Noakes has got around. Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen. Well, what we were thinking about mentioning was the fact this transition from wet to dry, this is probably the most dangerous part of the race. Now, that sounds a bit silly perhaps, but the reason it's the most dangerous part is you've now got a circuit that's starting to warm up a little bit. So these wet tyres, which have got less life in them already, again, the fact that drivers have been doing the best part of half the race with them, they don't have too much of the tread block left compared to how it started, but tyres are getting hotter, which means the grip level of the wet tyre starts to go down. Add to that as well the fact this circuit naturally is getting faster. That means drivers start to get more and more confident, and then you get this weird blend of confidence meets a diminishing tyre life meets a warming circuit, and it really is a toxic concoction here, and you will see drivers go around the result because they're suddenly trying to figure out where is the speed on the circuit, and as soon as they discover they can go a tenth quicker at a certain corner, they start to assume you can go a tenth quicker at the next corner. It adds up as that car going around, and I think that there is Clark's car having even more woes and misery at what was Blanchimont, as meanwhile Fotis Katios sits at 37.22, and we'll give them the previous best were 38. It's the side already. We are now starting to go a second a lap faster if you can nail the lap out there. And well, everyone right now is definitely going to be trying to pick up the pace as quickly as they can. Still, there's plenty of time left in this one as Katios got a bit sideways there through Eau Rouge. But Ryan Hayes is an absolute daredevil with it, and that's what I mean to say at the back. Right now for him, no matter how sideways that car is, he'll be gridded every step of the way until it ends up in the barrier. Although he'll be hoping that doesn't happen, of course. But here's Max Wheeler chasing Archie Williams in front of them. I do believe that's going to be one of the old duty cars, Porsches, that's going to lap down, and Williams can just use it a bit of a buffer there. And that is the Porsche of none other than Darren Sharp, who's stepping aside and letting both the lead pro drivers go. But understandably there, I suspect, Wheeler was hoping he'd have an opportunity to the bus stop chicane, but the timing made it so he wouldn't have that opportunity, although Sharp was a really good exit out of the bus stop chicane, and Wheeler will be looking in his left-hand mirror thinking, is he going to go for a move? And the answer is no. Sharple's backs off entirely there, being a very fair racer. But as we close in on the halfway point, we have had a few stops for drivers. We've had Kyle Roy come into the pit lane, and I believe Roy has actually been in and had all the tyres changed on the car. So he has gone to potentially the slick. Here he is. Although, in fact, so I double-check the pit length time. Oh, as he goes sideways at Pouhon Bend, if he's gone to the slick tyre, well, it's been a huge gamble, and now that it's in the gravel, those tyres are going to lose a lot of temperature, and they're going to get a lot more standing water on them as he rejoins. Well, Roy's stationary time was 26 seconds. Normally, it's around 28 to 30 seconds for all four tyres to be changed. I wonder if he's put a fresh set of wet tyres on for most of the compound. We'll have to wait and see, but Roy right now definitely out there, and with the way things are going, well, I think it's a gambit he's taken. It may not be a gamble that's worked out at early pit stop, but perhaps the fuel tank did not have enough in it to enable him to go any deeper. And of course, that's a big risk now, as I think he's on slicks, in fact, Roy, because he's struggling out there. And if he is on slicks, he's trying to get the heat into tyres. And this is the hard part when you're on a slick, on a wet track that's drying. You have to get the slick warmed up. They do have warming jackets on the tyres, but the problem is they won't be anywhere near the temperature you need. I think they come out of the jackets at around about 50 degrees centigrade. You need to be at around 70 to 80 on the track to feel confident. And the problem is, to get tyre temperature, you've got to drive quickly. But driving quick on a wet circuit, it is a contradiction, and the quicker you drive, the less grip you have until you get the heat. So therefore, he's got to push hard right now. If Roy has gone to slicks, unfortunately, we don't have that data available for you, ladies and gentlemen. We're having to use guesstimation. As I look at my commentator with window, Fotis Katios is into the pit lane, as on screen, Harry Seven around the outside of Stephen Wilkinson there to complete the move for 14 plays. But Wilkinson right now, third in club, and chasing that first podium of the season. He's looking confident at the moment. But Katios in then. Is this to go to the slick tyres? Tim Probert stays out. Thomas Noakes is also in after his spin earlier on. So Probert decides to go one more lap here. And well, this circuit, you can see the spray starting to lessen behind the cars at certain points. Although we still do have a wet track surface here. I think that a lot of drivers might be forced in because of their fuel tanks rather than because they're choosing to go to the slick tyre. But Noakes right now coming to a stop. Katios still being serviced there. That is going to be a 30-second stop or so. That is to have the tyres changed. So Katios has gone to the slick tyre. 30.61 seconds. That's the length for pit stop we are normally expecting around about that mark. And I wonder Now, how well he can get these tyres switched on. We could see a lot of cars go round as they try to make this transition. Jack Barker all over the back of Martin Kenyon, the club leader. And right now, Jack Barker being the referee in a battle between two club drivers, because behind him is Jordan Maymar, second of your club drivers, as they come on towards the bus stop chicane, and everybody into the pit lane. So I think the fuel tanks have gone as far as they can for most drivers, and everybody is seeing as well this circuit is getting drier, so they're all willing to risk it. But the question is, has Tim Probert, by going just one extra lap here, been able to pull off a bit of a magical miracle? Is he going to have a circuit that's just slightly drier and more accommodated to a slick tyre? Well, we'll have to see. Eduardo Roy's there into the pit lane as well. Look out my content booth window. Austin Graff just following Probert on around, but we could see a huge change in the order now, as everyone is going to be driving on an ice rink, as it will feel to those tyres, at least for the first 2 to 3 laps. We can see the spray becoming much less prominent now behind the cars, even on the high-speed sections, and that's a sign there where the tyre now has definitely transitioned. As Cassius carries on, well, Barker leaves the pits, and his pit stop time only 18 seconds. So Barker for Major Racing is staying on his wet tyres. He may have changed 1 or 2 of them, but he's staying on the wet tyre, and well, he's playing it safe for now. But the problem is he's gambling here on the idea of the fact this circuit is not going to become dry enough that those wet tyres will start to overheat and blister. I think they will, in the final 10 minutes, potentially come back to haunt him. But at that point, if Barker's able to put together some very good laps, plus as well, he's bought himself time ahead of his rivals, he may just be able to make a bit of a leapfrog here on strategy. Meanwhile, well, that means that Stephen Wilkinson, who's done well, Stephen Wilkinson's still going. He's not come in yet, so he's now leader of the club class for at least a lap. So I don't think this was on his bingo list in terms of leader lap of the class over the course of the season, but he's going to do it here, and it's good to see him doing so. Jordan Maymar, meanwhile, has come out ahead of Martin Kenyon. They practically had an identical pit stop, but Maymar, 2 seconds faster in the pit, has leapt ahead of Kenyon. So in the end, SimCast Racing UK, quicker on the guns, and well, they've got the job done there. Changing the tyres plus putting the fuel in. Kenyon, meanwhile, has lost out a little bit, but Matthew Croft just in front there. He's also had his pit stop, but look at Alexander Vingmark. He has yet to pit. The Beta Ross driver going as long as he can. Probert, meanwhile, as I look out my Conte booth window, is into the pit. And this is the big pit stop for Send It Racing, because now, going 1 extra lap, does it beat this man? Well, Katios makes his way onwards. I don't think it does, because he comes on down. Probert's still being serviced, and in fact, I think Tim Probert's been involved in an incident at some point on that lap, because Katios is already clear of him. Oh my good lord, no, in fact, no. Whoa, 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 whoa. Let's wind this back a little bit, because Fotis Katios' last lap, a 3-minute 18.54. No, it was the right lap to come in. Katios has just leapfrogged Probert by the best part of 10 seconds by undercutting him. So Probert going long was not the right call, because of the fact he's lost time where there was effective time on the slick tyre. But as Probert comes back out, and in fact only a 17-second stop, he's gone back out on his wet tyres. So Probert right now jumps Noakes, but he's going to lose out to Katios. You needed to go onto the slick tyre in this pit stop. I think those who stayed on the wet, they're going to lose out massively now as time goes on. Again, we're guessing who's on what tyre, but right now, Probert we believe is on wet still. Katios is on fresh slicks, but the problem is he's still finding the grip out there, but he's pushing incredibly hard to find it. But we've got a lot of drivers who have made the transition to the slicks, and they're going to be rewarded as this race goes into the distance. Eduardo Roy's as well now. You're into leader for Axis in Sports Ashley Brooks Designs. Well, he's absolutely flying out there, leader of the interclass, and I don't think he's going to be touchable at this rate. As Max Wheeler leaves the pit lane, he's completely left Archie Williams behind. Jack Barker carries on. Barker's into second now in the interclass. But remember, he's still on his wet tyres that he started this race, and he may have replaced 1 or 2 of them, but he's on the wet compound, so he's gained early, but he's going to lose out later on. Let's wait and see which way the pace goes, although his lap, a 3:09.61. Keep in mind, these are pit exit laps as well. Well, those wet tyres, they're going to feel very quick. They're really going to come alive, and then sunny, they're going to lose a lot of pace. So there's the surprise there, but Barker right now absolutely hounded as he makes his way on around. I think that's all he can do at this point, is attack as much as possible, and if suddenly the tyre comes back against him towards the end of the race, then he's going to simply come into the pits and hope that he's been able to pick up all the time he can. But meanwhile, Mikey Stewart there, as it's Hendrik Zilka taking a bit of a trip to the barrier. Expend, the old Duty Cars Amnesia car right now definitely struggling along, but Mikey Stewart goes round the outside there of David Young, and well, both of them The woes as Stuart gets it wrong, coming through Pouhon bend, and the car goes sideways. Does he complete the lazy slide? He does. He gets it stopped, just brushes the barrier there. I think the Sim Coach sponsor on the side just been slightly wiped off, but still Mikey Stuart's 2-3-3, not end up in arrears there. No damage to the car, and that was definitely a hold your breath moment as he finally got it stopped just in the nick of time. And Steve Hobbs is coming up behind him there in the Sim Coach car, and well, the 316 drive there in a new livery, a very different livery on that car. Lovely livery, I must be said. Well, as he brings it together, David Young's had a bit of a moment, and I think you're going to see what is the club driver drop behind both the Inter and Pro driver. Yes, he does. But meanwhile, as it falls apart for him for a brief moment at the front of the field, things are looking very quick for Fotis Katios. A 2-minute 36.84, and right now he is flying out there, albeit Tim Probert, meanwhile, also on similar lap times by comparison. And his slick tyres at the moment, they are not quite beating the wets. They are almost to beating the wet. And what I suspect within the next 10 minutes, we will see the slick tyres start to gain that pace as Katios does put a lap on Grant Miller there. But right now, he is driving on the limit here to be able to keep this all together. But Katios doing absolutely a brilliant job. And if we believe he's on the slick tyre is true, well, definitely right now, he's showing that he is very slick with it. But with that, we've got some big moments to talk about from earlier on in the race, some very contentious moments at that, and this was before the pit stop started really playing out. And we do take a quick trip back in time, starting with what happened to Luke Sherlock back on lap 14. And this was a circuit that was starting to dry as Luke Sherlock had things go a bit wrong for him, and a big loss there through Pouhon at the rear end, and the car rolling backwards. But as he did so, Harry Savan had this happen moments later. This was your Mercedes driver, Spectre Racing, heading up the hill for Eau Rouge and Radion, and before he even turned into the right hand, the rear had started to let go. I think it's that big puddle of the water in the middle of the road that upset the car, and rolled one way then the other, but thankfully able to stay off the race line and get it turned around on the escape area. We also did have this big moment for Harvey Wheeler. And this was a big moment because he ended up tying to the pit lane as a result of it, sadly. And this was coming out of turn number 7. The three-wheeler racing car letting go on the rear end. The tyre barrier on the inside was calling for him. And sadly, he hit it on both ends of the car. And that was a trip to the pit lane very quickly. Tom Cordy, meanwhile, at the time running in second in the Interclass. He had a mistake of his own at Pouhon bend, replicating what happened to Luke Sherlock. And this suddenly enabled Jack Barker to take the place back. Barker wasn't too far behind. There you could see him as the camera panned back to him. And well, Barker able to take that place back as Cordy tried to get it back together. Now, as he recovered, meanwhile, we did have a bit of a moment for none other than what was James Connolly. And this was Connolly having a nightmare. In fact, the car was already bruised and broken there. And I think he's had a bit of a moment at Blanchimont bend, so just trying to get into the pits for UKSimRacing Norris. Did he manage to do so? The answer was yes, but he almost missed the pit entry there, but just about snuck in. And then we had this for Thomas Noakes. Now, this was critical. This was from second place in Pro before the pit stops. And the MK Sim Sport driver being caught out of Pouhon bend. Pouhon catching out many a driver. And he went all the way round. And in the end, Tim Probert had to sneak up the inside with a little bit of space available. And we just about did so. But we also did have a bit of a moment for other drivers later on. This was Peter Holt having a bit of a moment. And this was as the pit stops really started to play out. And well, made his way through into Pouhon bend. And the Send It racing driver sent it a bit too hard. And went sideways there and rolled it backwards and into the gravel trap. But was able to get out in the end, albeit not with a bit of difficulty. And we also had this for Jordan Maymar. Now, I believe he was, in fact, no, this is just footage of him leaving the pit lane there. So we do apologise for a bit of confusion. But that's how he was able to get ahead of Martin Kenyon. So he just about snuck ahead there on a slightly faster pit stop. So that was the change for the club lead. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we make our way back to live racing. And as we do come back, well, we still do have the best part of 35 minutes or so left in this race. And we are starting to see this circuit now getting drier and drier. And what is track temperature looking like, I hear you ask? Well, here's the proof of the pudding. Look to your right hand side of your screen, and you'll see track temperature at the moment is 16 degrees centigrade still. Ambient 18 degrees centigrade, so the track is not coming up to temperature just yet, but it will start to, and that's when we really will start to see what is that evolution in the favour of the slick tyre, and the wet tyres will start to really overheat. Albeit there is quite a bit of water out on the circuit, so drivers will be able to use the water offline to cool the tyres down, but a racing line will start to form little by little, and it's that racing line that becomes such an important part of the equation. We're looking to your class positions they currently stand. Well, we can see there we've had retirements across all classes, but particularly the pro class has lost quite a few individuals, including none other than Harvey Wheeler, Casper Rotner, Anton Kalo, and also none other than Kieran Davidson. But with difficulty and trials and oh my goodness, well that's difficulty there for Jack Barker. And who was that with? I think that was with Matthew Croft. I think the two of them had to come in together. My good lord, and well, Jack Barker coming into the instant there. And well, suddenly, what was looking to be second place in the interclass all nailed on, it's all gone very wrong. And well, I think both drivers there involved in that one. We're not quite sure who may be at fault, but we're not going to point fingers either way. But what we can point to is the fact that Jack Barker right now in a car that's definitely wounded and just trying to hold it together. Matthew Croft has towed to the pit lane. Well, I think there the severity of that incident cannot be understated. And Tom Cordy, well, he's already swept through back into second place in the interclass. Headlights flashing there. That's to send the signals to the Ford Mustang in front. He's going to put a lap on. That's Tom Wheeler to say I'm coming through. And the Phoenix Racing Red driver will just go around the outside there. And you've got to feel for Barker because he was really recovering well for that second place after his off earlier on, but right now something tells me as the club leader Martin Kenyon tries to come through. Hold up a second, where's Jordan Maymar gone in all this? I think we missed something with Jordan Maymar in terms of our replays because he's had a mistake somewhere, and Martin Kenyon has taken the club lead back, and Jack Barker right now, well, just trying to survive, but Hayden Young is encroaching upon him. There you can see the 246, and right now the Send It Racing car on the attack. Brandon Vincent Squibb is 9 seconds back, but also closing gradually. So therefore the podium places could all chop and change and into just like that. But what a sudden twist there. But we need to understand what exactly happened, and I wonder if we will be able to get a replay of it, ladies and gentlemen. Give us a brief moment, and I think we might be able to get the footage, and here we go for a trip back in time. So we take a look back. This was going back initially to Matt Scalgate's start of the lap, but we are going to look to the footage of Barker and Croft. So we have got a bit of an extended replay here. This is the only footage we've been able to get. So Barker making his way through the opening corner, chased after Croft, and we're getting ready to go up the hill. But Barker at this point looking to be a bit of a quicker driver, but the gap between the two of them, 5 tenths here. I wonder if Croft's had a bit of an error at Eau Rouge and Radion. So up the hill he went, took a lot of curb in, and on exit, the rear of the car let go. And at this point, Barker's not had time to react. Croft's lost it, and Barker's coming to the scene of the incident. And well, very unfortunate there. No malice meant by either driver, but Matthew Croft just having a bit of a wayward moment, and Barker in the right place at the wrong time, so go round the outside, and that's how it all played out. And that explains the story, ladies and gentlemen, as we make our way back to your live pictures. So, a heartbreaking moment there for Made for Racing and also for Axis Simsport in a fair respect. Right now, still plenty more to come, perhaps with just over half an hour to go. And indeed, this race is not over yet. We are now down to 31 runners at this time. David Young being the last of your runners. We are losing drivers gradually. Incidents have definitely cost a few. And it's about survival as much as it is right now about being the quickest out there. It is the survival of the fittest, many would say. And those who are fit to adapt to the evolving conditions. But there's Jake Muttit here for Phoenix Racing Blue. We briefly lose him for a moment and he comes back from the ether, trying to attack Alexander Wingmark for 18th place. Well, Wingmark here could be on for course for his first ever podium in the UK SimRacing Sunday Series. The base rush driver right now looking good, and he's just simply stayed out of trouble every step of the way. Now he is on, as we believe he is on the slick tyre and trying to keep it together, albeit trying to find that dry line as well. And Jake Muttit trying to find a way past. Now, if you are Jake Muttit at this point, I think he'll be very eager to make a move on Wingmark, but I think Wingmark is not defending necessarily as Grant Miller comes into the pit lane. I wonder if that's potentially for a drive-through penalty. We'll have to see. The Phoenix Racing red car comes down. No, that is for strategy. I think he was in the pits earlier on for repair work and he decided to put some fuel in the car. Well, he has extended his race a bit, so Miller's now in for a strategic stop, but it does become a 2-stop race for him. Alexander Wingmark then is going to look very safe here unless there's going to be another pit stop that we don't know about. We think the optimum strategy is the 1 stop, and a lot of drivers right now seem to be sticking to that strategy as best as they can. But Wingmark coming on through there, and well, Muttit, I think at this point would like to get on past, but Wingmark not going defensive, I think just trying to make sure he keeps his lines together. Muttit having a much stronger run coming down through turn number 7. We look up the inside into a large bend. I don't think so. The one thing that Wingmark can do, of course, if he feels like he's being pressured here too much, is he can just pull off a racing line for a brief moment, but if he's on the slick tyre, You can't really afford to do that because there will be water off racing line. Plus, as well, when you start to slow down, you lose tyre temperature. So he's got to be careful about how he negotiates this. Meanwhile, Harry Stern being passed around the outside by Andrew Mentine. Mentine makes his way on past. And well, we catch the tail end of that move. But Mentine making his way onwards there into 5th place in the interclass. But can he hold on to it? Sven now looks to go on the attack. And the Axis Sport Smurfs driver right now, well, given how his race started, remember he was in the podium spots early on in the race, had that huge spin at Eau Rouge and Rally on the first to be caught out by Eau Rouge today, and well, he's made his way back to 5th, and Brandon Vincent Squibb is 11 seconds up the road, matching on pace, but that's the van passed, and right now your 200 driver here absolutely flying. He's doing everything he can to limit the damage that this race is going to do to his championship, and well, he's doing an absolutely stellar job at the moment, as he does drop the Spectre of racing at Mercedes, at least for now. As we do see them make their way towards the end of this lap. Well, exactly how did that move come about? We will get a replay of that very shortly. As meanwhile, we look back up to Tom Cordy. Currently second in the interclass, and his gap to Eduardo Royes is gradually growing. It is not going down, and that gap now to the tune of almost, I believe, about 45 seconds. Royes is absolutely flying in that Ferrari. He really has been glued on. Wet conditions are the Spaniards' absolute dream conditions out there, and the Axis Sport AV Designs driver from Spain right now looking very comfortable for 4th place overall, and with it the class win. But of course he's still got to get it to the very end, and you can see there how much he's starting to drive between the Stavlo corners. Very little spray there, a bit on the corner exit, but that really goes to show you this circuit is warming up quite nicely. The sun is out, and it's only going to exponentialify the rate of drying of the circuit. But as we do see the 274 driver carrying on, and making his way on past Darren Sharp's car there, putting a lap on it. Well, meanwhile, what's going on further back is that Kyle Roy is trying to find a way past Daniel Pace for 15th overall. And Kyle Roy right now in 6th in the pro class. He's got a long way to go before he finds the top 5 of the class. He's very lonely, in fact, right now, because the next driver behind him is Matthew Croft, but Croft is the best part of half a lap behind him. So therefore, Roy is very comfortable here in 6th place in class, but I think he would like a few more points. That's the way this day is going. There's Jack Barker. As I look at my commentator booth window, it's looking quite sad there down the pit lane for the Motor Racing team. He's making his way into the pits, and I suspect work will be done to the car, and well, he's making his way back out ready. I wonder, in fact, if it's a drive-through penalty for Jack Barker, so I don't think he stopped there. I think he's had to come through due to instant points being racked up. But as Matthew Croft has towed to the pits off camera, so I believe there's been a bit of an incident for Croft. It really now is a race there where it's all about surviving, and Kyle Roy goes very sideways into Pouhon bend, and that's exactly our point. Small mistake there, could see it all fall apart. Andrew Mentine, after breaking away from Harry Severn, is being caught back up by the Mercedes driver. This middle sector, this time around, favouring the 207 rather than the 200. And Mentine sliding around there. Now, he has pitted, of course, although our information does say he's on a no-stop. However, he has pitted. That's a glitch on our timing tower. And, well, it is Harry Severn who is currently on wet tyres. Mentine, we believe, it is on the slick tyre, and that's the difference. That's why when he nails the lap, he is able to run away. But as soon as he touches a patch of water, or he doesn't quite get the line perfect, suddenly that car is more sideways than straight, and that is the gambit, of course, by going to the slick tyre. You are constantly having to battle against the circuit and make sure you are absolutely perfect in your lines, which over 20 minutes of racing is relatively straightforward to do, practice. Your concentration levels, they're always at 100%, but you can withstand that. The best part of 90 minutes of racing, where your concentration levels will be taxed, they will be drained, and you still have to have the energy to be able to get this absolutely right. But in the rear of the picture, there is your Phoenix Racing Blue machine of Nick Parks. And right now, 7th place in the interclass, closing gradually on Severn and Mentine. So keep your eyes out for him. He could yet potentially have a chance of this, as that's an Acura coming out the pit lane. That's Max Galgay, who now is the best part of 2 laps down, I believe, on the overall leaders. But he's carrying on there in the Acura. He's definitely had a bit of a brutal race, but still trying to keep his spirits as high as possible. So at this point, no real battles on the road, at least for now. We are really just waiting to see how everyone comes together on strategy. But the majority of the field are on slick tyres and trying to survive on slicks. But we do have a couple of drivers who are braving it on wet, including this man who makes his way into the pit lane. So the Send It Racing driver comes in. Surely that's not to come in for a pit stop. It must be a drive-through for Tim Probert, because if it is to come in to go onto the slick tyre, Well, suddenly his strategy has collapsed on him, and that car is looking to be pulling over to the right. And I think the team have realised the fact they've not got the right call here. So he comes on down, and I think it's going to be all 4 tyres being changed, as Thomas Noakes, meanwhile, will retake second place. But, of course, a Probet, given the gap between him and Max Wheeler, he may be coming out in behind Wheeler. So Wheeler's currently 4th in the Pro class. Will he come out ahead? Well, Probet's now halfway through the pit stop. He's having all 4 tyres changed. It's going to be close between these two. Probet, in fact, may still come out ahead here. In fact, he's now leaving the pit. Well, 22-second stationary stop. That's not normally enough time to be able to change all 4 tyres. It's normally 7 seconds per tyre, unless I've been misinformed. So he's going to come back out here. So I wonder what the team have done for Send It Racing. Well, whatever they've done, they think they've done the right thing, but he is on a 2-stop strategy. As Max Wheeler comes out, the only other thing, of course, would be perhaps he's decided to come in for fuel, and with it has changed a couple of the wet tyres that are starting to diminish. Still hoping to stay on the wet. Well, if so, then if we're looking at a 2-stop strategy, that goes completely against what we were expecting. But, to be fair, that's sometimes the way it goes. We're always kept guessing here. We can only go with the information we've got here in the commentary booth. But Max Wheeler carrying on, and you'll see that gap to Probet's now down to 5 seconds. So you'll know that there's been a pit stop that's been made, either that or a huge incident. But then he'll recognise the fact there will have been a pit stop because Probet's car's just in front of him. I understand, but your 333 drive right now might be seeing some light at the end of the tunnel if he wants to convert his door number into his finishing position, which should be at 3rd on the podium. But heading onwards, well, meanwhile, we do look back to Matthew Massey, who's just behind him, the Spectre Racing driver in the 189. Looking very good there, currently 4th place in club, not quite in with a chance of a podium at the moment, given the gap to Vingmark. But understandably for him, this could still be a huge result. 4th place, a big haul of points, and beating quite a formidable set of rivals as well, including, of course, the likes of Grant Miller, who's 5th behind. And here is Miller right now, who is closing him down little by little, half a second a lap. And he's putting a big gap over David Pilcher, the SimRacing Racing driver, who's 43 seconds behind. And here he is right now in a BMW M4 Evo, just trying to make sure he doesn't make any mistakes. And to be fair to him, 6th place in the club class, the team will be absolutely ecstatic about that. It'll be a big haul of points for him and the team championship as well. I mean, after 2 rounds, they've definitely landed some solid points. Although sadly, Jordan Maymar won't be landing any points today for the team, given his retirement. And well, it was looking so good for him until it was not. But whilst it's gone wrong for some and not quite for all, will mean the new fastest lap of the race, a 2-minute 35.43 for this man, Fotis Gatios. He's flying out there for Split Straight Esports at the moment, and we're coming down into Wood. Your 390 driver right now, really just trying to put an end to this race. He is 44 seconds clear of Thomas Noakes at the moment. He has shown no sign of slowing down. He is getting quicker and quicker every lap out there. He's taking risks to do it, but to be fair, I think right now you are really looking at what is a driver in his element, although finding himself a bit wider at Rivage Bend. Any wider than that, I think it would have been going off to the runoff there, if not around. But Fotis Gatios right now finding the lines that others would not dare to touch, and he's keeping that Corvette pointed in a straight line as best he possibly can. But as he does so, well, meanwhile, we did, of course, have some difficulties for a few tries earlier on. And we're going to get a replay of some big moments, and I believe we may be getting a replay of what happened to Jordan Maymar that saw him retire. And here we go for a trip back in time, ladies and gentlemen, to see what exactly brought Jordan Maymar's race to a bit of a tragic end. This was Nick Parks making his way on, and John. Oh my good lord! And well, coming through Blanchimont Bend onto its roof, up over and around, and even more savage instance of what happened compared to Slight Anti earlier on. The suspension has collapsed, the rear wing has gone. We only caught the tail end of it, but Jordan Maymar in the end losing at Blanchimont, the car coming out wide, and that is how his race came to bits. So for Maymar, all over just like that, but what a brutal end to the race for him. Meanwhile, we did have this big moment as well for Matthew Croft. Only a couple of laps later, and this was Croft already struggling with grip out there, making his way in towards Malmedy, and the rear of the car saying no, and well, turnstiles caught out so many, the slowest bump to the barrier could have, around and losing the rear wing, and at that point I think Matthew Croft's race was essentially going to be towed to the pits at some point. We also did have a bit of difficulty for Jack Barker a lap later on lap 23, and in fact that was the drive-through penalty just being confirmed as he made his way on out, so just gradually heading towards the pit lane exit, but seeing the place he's losing there, and Barker falling backwards, and he made his journey back on. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, well, we also did have this happen to Tim Probet. So Max Wheeler was chasing him down, and this was Probet making his way in towards Lecom. Went straight on there, no tyre temperature, and the car just having to go straight on and around. and this was Max Wheeler trying to catch up to him. So Wheeler didn't quite close up then, so when did he make the move? Well, this was later on the same lap, and this was coming in towards Pouhon Bend, and Probert went wide, went up onto the curb. He's got no grip at that point, and Wheeler just simply scooped up the inside and said thank you very much. Although, to be fair, backed off entirely, making sure not to understeer out wide and elbow his rival. And Max Wheeler up into third place there in the Pro Class, just like that. And then Probert had a bit of a spin afterwards that cost him as well. With that, it's back, well, in fact, not a spin, he just went off there at the Fantasy Chicane. We do catch it, and then brought it back on. But that's how third place in the Pro Class change, and it's back to your live racing we come. And as we do come back, well, 20 minutes still to go. This race still most likely going to have some twists and turns in it before all is said and done. Speaking of which, Harry Savan in a big queue of medley of cars here. That is Stephen Wilkinson, second of your club runners, ahead of Carl Wright, Daniel Pays and Harry Savan. And, well, if you're Wilkinson right now, given the fact that Alexander Vingmark is almost 20 seconds behind, and you've got this long queue, I can understand Wilkinson probably doesn't want to change his line because he's just focused on keeping it together. But I suspect there's going to be a voice on the radio to him, most likely saying, you may as well try to get these guys to go past you, Stephen, because right now they're not in a fight with you and it's not worth fighting. And you can see that dry line there as Carl Roy goes up the inside, and Wilkinson here will be made to go a little bit deep. But, of course, he just wants to keep it together. And Roy tried to sneak his way from inside to outside, but Wilkinson's not going to back off just yet. And now on the inside here, down towards Stavilo 1, he lets Roy go. Does he let Pays go as well? He does. Daniel Pays up the inside. And, well, Wilkinson onto that exit curve. He's got to be careful bringing it back on. He does so. And now here comes Harry Savan as well. He wants to chase after Daniel Pays as Colroy goes round and round again. It keeps spinning and he gets it back together. And, well, my goodness, Colroy, there's 720 degrees just like that. And the Exit what SimWorks driver brings it together, but I've never quite seen that. And I suspect Pays, Wilkinson and Stan were all looking to left thinking, when is it going to stop? And the answer is it only stopped after they'd all passed him. Well, my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, what a moment there for Colroy. And, well, that could have been tragic, but in the end it turned out tremendous. As Grant Miller, meanwhile, passing Matthew Massey down the Kemmel Straight. We're seeing the tail end of that battle for full place in the club class. David Pilcher's into the pit lane again. So the car being looked at there by the team. They're doing some work to it. I suspect it might be potentially to put some fuel in to get to the end or some repair work. But meanwhile, Massey versus Miller at the moment, and, well, it does look as though Grant Miller is gradually pulling away as Andrew Montaigne is into the pit. So is Carl Roy. I wouldn't be surprised if Roy is coming in for a drive-through penalty, given the instant points are accumulating for everybody here. Andrew Montaigne, meanwhile, he's in. The car's up on the jacks. They're putting slicks on that car for Axis Sport Smurfs, so therefore he's going to give it one last go. Now he's got nothing to lose here, and those on the wet tyre, who I think gambled staying on it with 20 minutes left to go. This circuit is now in slick territory almost. We are starting to see, look at the tarmac there as Fotis Katios makes his way around. Yes, you've still got a little bit of spray coming off the back of the car. Yes, you've got puddles around the circuit, but you've also got a much drier line, and the slick tyre right now is the optimum tyres. We do see David Young stepping aside there for the race leader, and Katios is literally putting in faster and faster laps every turn. Right now, I think the 390 driver at this point with a 47.5 seconds lead. Whilst he could afford to back off, he's not going to, and will make his way onwards there to come down the hill. And, well, trying to cool the tyres down perhaps. Is he on wets, in fact? In fact, those tyres are starting to burn away. If so, and perhaps we got it wrong with the drivers going into a slick tyre, but either way, Katios there definitely trying to cool the tyres down by the looks of things. A bit of an oddity, and also on the inside there. So perhaps he did go to wet tyres, and that's why he's pumping the tyres, but now he's having to cool them down. Well, either way, definitely right now, this race still keeping us on edge, and Katios just has to keep it together for another, what is this lap, plus another 8 more. Easier said than done, however, and it's still a way to go. John Harley, meanwhile, well, he's currently running 10th in the interclass. He's definitely had one of those races. They've gone up, down, and around as it goes around for Andrew Montaigne. And he rolls back in the end, and John Harley's got nowhere to go. He could have stopped in the middle of the road, but then other cars would have been coming. And unfortunately, Andrew Montaigne could not get the pendulum to stop the Axis Sport Smurfs Lamborghini. And that car in bits, as meanwhile, you'll see, was a lap down machine making its way on past there. Oh, Peter Holt in lap down to the leaders, of course, but not a lap down there to Andrew Montaigne. And the Senate Racing Bulls driver now up into 10th place in the interclass. John Harley up a place with some damage to the car. I wonder if we're going to see that car come into the pit lane at some point. You can see it off in the distance there. But Peter Holt now at least, well, he'll be happy to move back into the top 10 as Montaigne has towed to the pit lane. And indeed, you could not make this up right now. This race constantly going one way, then the other. It is so unpredictable right now. And, well, at any moment, we could have just another twist in the tail to come. Well, as Holt carries on, well, meanwhile, where are the close battles at the moment? Well, Daniel Pays and Harry Savan still fighting over 6th place in the interclass. Gap between the two of them, 1.1 seconds they cross the timing line. And, well, both drivers putting in personal best there, with Savan the best part of 9 tenths faster. So, in theory, you would expect the Spectre Racing driver is going to have an opportunity to go on the attack at the very end of this race. But we do take a bit of a sip of water there. The only problem, of course, is Harry Savan, if he does get close enough, he's then got to try and find a way to make a move off of the drier line where the grip will be. And indeed, both of these drivers right now pushing onwards, although Savan does have an advantage, which is he is running on the wet tyres still. Meanwhile, Daniel Pays, we believe, may, well, in fact, as he comes off race 9. Now, I think, in fact, when we've seen drivers have a longer pit stop, we've not seen them go to slicks. We've seen them go to a fresh set of wets, an entire set of them, rather than just a couple of tyres being changed. So we do apologise for the confusion there, but it does seem as though, in the fact, we are seeing several drivers now trying to cool their tyres down, and it does seem as though everyone may be on wet tyres, but the thought process is going to be the fact they're trying to cool them with the circuit getting much drier. Tim Probert, meanwhile, under pressure from Tom Cordy. Cordy's going to sweep on through there. Probert going wide at Stavlo 2, or Paul Ferrier, and therefore it's now Cordy up into 5th place, overall 2nd of your inter-drivers. Archie Williams is closing quite quickly as well, the Access Sport with SimWorks driver, who was battling with Max Wheeler much earlier in the race. He's going to find Tim Probert very shortly, 2 seconds ahead of him. He's going to enjoy another battle, but it will once again be a spot just outside the top 5. And indeed, Max Wheeler right now seems to be set for that 3rd place spot on the podium, unless there's another twist in the tail. Well, we'll have to see about that, because as Williams makes his way on past Grant Miller, he puts a lap on. Miller right now looking comfortable in 4th place in club class and heading down towards turn 1. And at this point, well, the 180 driver from Scotland not doing anything wrong here. He's doing everything right. He'll miss out on the podium today, but the flip side of the coin will be that this race has gradually come back his way after a difficult first half of the race. A few spins, a couple of incidents, and definitely a front bumper on that McLaren that could do with adjustment after the race. It's not looking straight. You can tell in the fact that one of the floodlights in the middle, the endurance light in the middle of the front bumper, is higher than the other. It normally should be quite level, although he'll get away with that as he makes his way onto the straight. But to Stephen Wilkinson, 2nd of your club drivers at the moment. Let's Carl Roy go after Roy's absolutely tremendous spin at that same corner, only 3 laps to go. And Wilkinson right now does have the growing threat of Alexander Vingmark approaching him. Vingmark is lapping quite quickly, so Wilkinson at this point may be at risk of losing the run-up spot in the club class, but then they will have a grand total of a minute between them and Grant Miller. So Vingmark here is on course for his first podium in his SimRacing International Sunday GT3 Championship career, as is Stephen Wilkinson. But who's going to take the runner-up spot and who is going to have to contend with 3rd place? I think both of them, to be fair. If you were to say to them, you're going to finish on the podium today, I think they would both be saying to you, no, that's not going to happen. Well, I think Wilkinson will have taken a lot of inspiration from his qualifying performance to be 2nd on the starting grid of the club class, and Alexander Vingmark, meanwhile, he really has been a revelation. And we have seen this in previous seasons, to be fair, from the Beta Frost driver. His ability is not to be the quickest driver out there, but he is a very smart and consistent driver. He's down towards the back end of pace in the class he's normally in, but the upside is he really does focus on the fact he doesn't normally put a foot wrong. When he does, it's normally not his fault, or alternatively, it's an absolutely tragic moment if it is his fault. But the 169 driver right now, definitely doing everything right here. He tries to see that race to a close. But now the gap to Wilkinson, 3.2 seconds. You can see them both in the same camera shot, and therefore that battle is definitely going to be realistic within the next 2 to 3 laps. As Vingmark took another 2nd out of Wilkinson. So at this rate of closure, you would imagine that by what will be around 5 minutes remaining, he will be looking to go on the attack. But back to your lead then, and Katios right now still keeping it together here. 50 seconds is the gap between himself and Thomas Noakes. At this point, this man has completely checked out and already got set for Mugello, let alone win the finish at Spa-Francorchamps. But Katios is not slowing down by any means, although Eduardo Ruiz now is matching him for pace. The 3rd place runner overall, leader of the interclass, he's now saying, well, I took the pole position, I'm going to go all in. And Eduardo Ruiz definitely an absolute star in these changeable conditions. The Ferrari driver, although not faultless today, he did have that big off earlier on in the first stint, but after that he's got it back together, and right now it's definitely showing in terms of how he's piecing this race into a much more comfortable place. But Harry Savan and Daniel Pays still in the pursuit of one another. We jump on board here with your 7th place runner in the interclass, and well, compared to onboards we had earlier on, you can definitely see now the spray very different here as he makes his way up towards Blanchimont Bend. has a lot more visibility, and that visibility absolutely critical as he tries to carry more and more speed through the high-speed corner of the circuit. But look at that drying line there. You can see that really light grey patch of tarmac. It is effectively now a racing line that's formed, and Daniel Pays at 9 with that. And the pace is only going to improve. So does Sven. Oh, that's guy in the middle of the road. That's Nick Parks has gone around. And Parks gives a place up to both of them. So now the battle for 6th becomes the battle for 5th in the interclass. And suddenly some more points on the table there. And Parks making an innocent mistake. Not quite sure how he's made that happen. But the good news is we have the power of a replay to explain. And Nick Parks gets himself back together. But how did he get there in the first place? Here we go with 10 minutes to go. So back in time we go to Nick Parks' spin. And it's exactly what happened at the bus stop chicane. He was onto the brakes, in towards turn 18, got that set up quite nicely, and a very tight line into 19, tried to get the power down, the rear already started to let go, and at that point stopped it immediately, got it arrested before it completely turned around, and just avoided the inside barrier. Well done to him there, using the steering lock and the torque on the rear left tyre just to avoid it. The steering lock of these cars in first gear below 50 miles an hour is terrible. These cars, you need to drive them at speed. With most race cars, you really do need speed to get the steering to become light. At low speeds, they almost feel like the front engine front wheel drive. But meanwhile, Parks gets it back up to speed, and with that we go back to your live racing. And as we do, ladies and gentlemen, a bit of a moment there for Parks, but as you can see him now in 7th place there, still looking relatively safe from anybody else behind. But Pays and Sven, they're still there and thereabouts. They come through X-Bend, and Daniel Pays definitely feeling a bit of pressure now from the Mercedes driver behind, who is within slipstream distance. Although the slipstream, to be fair, is not going to be as powerful so far, given the conditions they're currently driving in. So therefore, the thought process at this point is going to be about lines and nailing your laps. But Pays, to be fair, in the medium speed sections is looking a bit quicker compared to Van. It does seem as though that Mercedes now really able to use its straight line speed to its advantage, and we are seeing that back and forth between the two cars. The characteristics are now starting to come out, and the balance of performance of the cars also playing its role. As meanwhile, further back, Jack Barker, well, he's in 11th place at the moment into glass, setting personal best at this time. So he's picking up the pace a little bit and almost matching the pace of Eduardo Roy as the leader of the class. But the motor racing driver with that trip to the pit lane for damage to the car, plus also, we believe, for a drive-through penalty. It's definitely been a very frustrating day for the 216 driver, who was looking glued on for an inter-podium at one point, but he's got to take the fortune forward. The fact that today it didn't quite work out after qualifying so well, but in the wet conditions, if he can keep it together and avoid getting caught up, where unfortunately today he got caught up with Matthew Croft going sideways, and again, no finger pointing at Matthew Croft there. It's just one of those things that unfortunately happens. It is a racing incident. Car comes loose. Barker comes into the scene of it. He wouldn't have seen the yellow flags in time. They wouldn't have been called, given how close he was, and therefore just unfortunately piles into an incident that's already happening. And coming out of Eau Rouge, you can't just suddenly put the brakes on, otherwise the car will go round. You will become the incident. And Jack Barker experiencing that. It could happen to anyone here today. It definitely has happened to a few drivers. We are now down to 27 runners. Last two runners here, David Young at the moment, the best part of 3 laps down, but the privateer still keeping it together, to be fair, and that's what it's all about. He's going to get it home, and at this point he's going to be bringing home 8th place in the club class, and it will be worth some valuable points as he goes deeper and deeper into the season. Remember, this is just round 2 of 10, and this season, our final 3 rounds, they are rounds that cannot be dropped. You only drop 1 score, and you drop it from between rounds 1 and 7. It's a very different format. It's the Showdown format for this season, and the final 3 rounds as well were 50% more points. So you want a good start to the season, but you really need to have your A game in come at rounds 8, 9, and 10. 3 60-minute rounds to complete the season, where we do have 2 endurance races this season as well, of which we have been partaking in, witnessing one of them today. But Stephen Wilkinson and Carl Roy, they swap once again, and Carl Roy make his way on past. This is becoming a bit of a trend, but it's not happened this time in terms of them swapping places around at Stavelot 2. Instead, it's happened down the Kemmel Straight, and Vingmark is not closing as rapidly anymore. It does seem as though Wilkinson is now finding some time to match Vingmark, and I wonder perhaps where he's decided to just get going a little bit more there, cognizant of the fact that this man may be looking to try and steal his 2nd place away come the very end. And well, Vingmark still has no pressure on Grant Miller, who's at the best part of a minute behind. So therefore, your top 3 in the club class look to be set in terms of who's going to be in it, but it's the final 2 steps to the podium that's still up for grabs perhaps in terms of who's going to be on which step. Looking to Max Wheeler, your 3rd place runner in the Pro class meanwhile, and the Averso Fast by 3-wheeler racing driver at this point. Well, what a race he's had chasing after Archie Williams for the entirety of the first stint, and it went wrong for Williams in regards to the pit stop strategy, and also a mistake. Meanwhile, for Wheeler, it all clicked together. Then a mistake for Tim Probert meant that suddenly he was able to move to third, and since then he hasn't let it go. And, well, that's why the British driver right now maybe 4th overall, but 3rd in class, and it's going to be his first major result in the wet in some time in the series, and, well, absolutely putting everything right here today. He started 3rd in class, and that's exactly where he's going to finish. But looking to Thomas Noakes, meanwhile, the MK SimSport driver who got the upper hand on Fotis Katios in qualifying with that absolutely daring lap at the end, which surprised everyone. Just suddenly found the pace and almost managed to steal back what would have been pole position overall. If he had had one more lap, I think he could have done it. But in the end, just showing you the fact you've really got to be on the ball with regards to qualifying and knowing exactly when you should be out there versus when you shouldn't be out there. And Noakes today losing out to Katios in the early stages, and with a couple of mistakes as well, just has not been able to equal this man. And right now, the Split Straight Esports driver, 5 minutes or so to go. He's got this lap plus at least one more. And, well, no mistakes being made at this point. The pace right now being equalised by Noakes and others. But to be fair, when he does have a 51-second gap, at this point he can afford to lose a little bit of time, even if it's not in his nature. Daniel Paynes, he's got Harry Savan closing on now for what is the battle for 5th in his class, and in fact has Savan practically in the draft there as they come down. Both drivers going to the inside line, and, well, definitely I think that confirms that I thought that everyone was on the slick. Incorrect. I think a lot of drivers, in fact everyone's on the wet tyre, and they're all trying to cool these wet tyres down to the very end of the race. Even though we do have a prominent dry line, do not be deceived out there. The circuit's still definitely very much in a position whereby the wet tyre is the safer tyre, and also still a grindy quick tyre. The slick cut over, meanwhile, you're still expecting that to occur in a roundabout. Well, in fact, you probably could get away with slicks right at the end of the race, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think anyone's going to gamble on coming into the pit at the very end. Indeed, there's no bonus points for fastest lap, so there'll be no value in trying to do that to squeeze a bonus point out. As you can see, that dry line very noticeable going into Pouhon bend, particularly on turning, and the fact you do have that wide light grey patch, and then you've got the really darker patches, which is where all the water is sat. And that's where Paynes keeps coming off the line there to cool his tyres. So then, meanwhile, not wanting to risk it, given the torque steer of that Mercedes engine. But as he comes on through, well, right now, middle sectors, definitely not where he can attack, but Paynes is slower in the more power-focused sectors, particularly Sector 1 and, to a lesser extent, Sector 3. And new fastest lap race, a 2:33.08 for Tim Probert, the McLaren driver, Send It Racing. These McLarens have looked very quick here today, as Martin Kenyon, meanwhile, a bit further back, club class leader. And white flag waving, so Fotis Katios does go onto a final lap here. So we will be seeing, even though we have got almost 3 minutes left to go, we are going to see the race called effectively a lap early. So 34 laps will be a lot today, ladies and gentlemen, by the looks of things. And for Fotis Katios, well, it has been a day, much like for Martin Kenyon, where it's had ups, it's had downs, it's had thrills, it's had spills, but they are going to see things through to the conclusion after 34 laps. And it's just one lap between them now, and victory for Martin Kenyon for Pistech Racing. Back-to-back wins for Fotis Katios, a first win of the season. And the same can be said for Eduardo Roy as your inter-leader at the moment, as he's looking cool, calm, composed and collected as he heads onwards. But Stephen Wilkinson and Alexander Wingmark are in front of him. They've got one more lap to go to do battle for second place, and Wilkinson here under pressure as Wingmark's going to look to the outside. Now Wilkinson does go defensive here, and it's going to be a battle on the brakes. Wingmark goes as late as he can, a little rub between the two of them. Wingmark gets the inside, however, he's going to risk it, and Wingmark wants it right now, but Wilkinson comes back on the outside. They touch doors once again, now heading onwards. Well, I think Wingmark's going to get better traction there as Wilkinson immediately wants to be in the tow. Eduardo Roy's there, being elbowed by the club driver who doesn't want the Spaniard in his way. And I think Wilkinson right now is trying to say to the Spaniard, look, I know you want to put a lap on me, but just leave me alone. And Eduardo Roy's there, taps him on the rear bumper coming through the source and says to him, we'll get a move on then, I'll give you one chance. But I think Wingmark right now may have got this done. Meanwhile, Daniel Paynes under pressure here, as that's going to be Sven trying to go around the outside from Lacombe to Malmedy. They're still coming down. They touch doors once, twice. Will they touch thrice? It doesn't look so at the moment. And Paynes right now defending hard, and he goes a bit too deep. Well, let's get Sven go wide. He takes a bit of water on the left-hand side tyres, and Paynes holds on to it for now. But coming in towards what result will be expand. Hayes is absolutely struggling right now to keep him behind. This battle really building up. And as they head in towards Pouhon Bend, well, we will have to leave them shortly because our leader's almost established already. But right now, Hayes definitely holding on for the final spot in the Inter top 5, doing everything he can to make sure it happens right here, right now. But as we can see Sven looking around the outside, so much speed! He's going to try and go around the outside. There's no space for him to go for that. And Sven right now absolutely being made sure to know where the racing line is as Hayes holds his ground. You see what Sven was trying to do, is trying to get Pace to come off a racing line and go back to the outside, but that was never going to happen. But meanwhile, as we do see Fotis Katios heading down towards the bus stop chicane, well, what a race it has been for him today. And as the checker flag gets ready to wave, with time complete for Fotis Katios, this is going to be a timeless classic. This is what the split track esports driver does when he's at his best. He takes victory, and he does it by a grand total of 50 seconds. He crawls across the line in joy. Thomas Noakes will be second shortly, but Martin Kenyon takes home the club win just behind him, a lap down. What a drive to make it 2 from 2 for Pitts Tech Racing. And then we will see Thomas Noakes slowly making his way towards the end of this race. But before that, will it be Vingmark? Will it be Wilkinson for second in club? I think it is going to be Vingmark at this point. I think he is clear. Pace and Savannah still fight each other as well, but it looks as though to line, Daniel Pace is just going to hold on. But what a fight between these two, and Harry Stern just could not find the tarmac to get it done for 5th place in the interclass. But we still got some drivers to come through. Hayden Young took 3rd place in the interclass, and well, congratulations to him for that. As we do see Thomas Noakes making his way towards the line. Here is the UKSim Sport driver bringing him home at 2nd place in the end in the pro class. And today, well, it hasn't quite worked out the way he wanted it to, but still 2nd is better than nothing. And he's got to take those points forward. He will be a championship leader carrying on to round number 3. And then we will see Eduardo Royes. And what VIR last season, it all ends up going wrong. But here today, the Spaniard delivers at Axis Sim Sports with AB Designs. It's 3rd overall. And with it, the Inter win, the first in a long time for him. What a drive. Max Wheeler's got some time before he sees the finish line. Alexander Vingmark takes 2nd place in club ahead of Stephen Wilkinson, the Beta driver beating the Simcast Racing UK driver. But they'll both be proud to take their first ever podiums in this series. Congratulations to both of them. And then Max Wheeler's got some time to go. As meanwhile, is that side by side between Barker and Holt? Yes, it is. Oh, they come into a bit of contact there. And suddenly the rear bumper comes off the back of Barker's car. My goodness, for Jack Barker, this race just ends in a grim ending. Meanwhile, Peter Holt, by looks of things, I wonder if Pete Holt's been disqualified there for instant points because his car has been just completely removed from the race. Well, if so, well, Jack Barker's removed his rear bumper in what is agreement with that. And, well, coming across the line, he'll take 10th in Inter. But meanwhile, Max Wheeler makes it on to the pro podium for a first so fast by Freewheeler Racing. 4th place there, but 3rd in class. He'll be pleased as punch for that. And Tom Cordy, the runner-up in Inter today. He's been up, he's been down, he's been around, but for Phoenix Racing Red, it's on the podium. And he'll definitely feel his feet touch the ground on that one. He'll be ecstatic about that. But what a conclusion to the race, ladies and gentlemen, and we're not quite done yet. We've still got a few more drivers to see the finish line, including Grant Miller here, who's going to come on home in 4th place in the club class when it's all said and done. It's been a bit of a changing day for the Scotsman, but to be fair, he's overcome most of the challenge and he crawls the line. I think fuel is literally running out. He's going to see his finish line then, and it will be 4th in class with Matthew Massey just behind there, completing the top 5 in the club class for Spectre Racing. And, well, the 189 driver will see it through to 5th place, even if it hasn't quite been his perfect race. But that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That's all of your lead lap finishers. We believe Holt has been disqualified down lap. We will get confirmation of that when we can. But with that, what a race it has been. And as Eduardo Royes cools them down in celebration here, and the Axis Sim Sports AB Designs driver, I don't think he's going to quite believe what he's been able to achieve today. Took the overall pole, couldn't quite take the overall win, but on the overall podium and 3rd in the interclass, well, he'll be ecstatic. It's very rare you see a top class driver take what is an overall podium, but when it happens, it's special. And for Eduardo Royes today, it's definitely going to feel a huge achievement. As Max Wheeler, he decides to do some donuts there to celebrate at Rivage for being on the podium. And as we run out of tape, we run out of time, let's take a look at those race results subject to Eddie Stewart's inquiries. And here they are. And as we can see in the end, Fotis Katios taking that victory for Split Track Esports. But what a victory it was. A win by 51 seconds as classified indeed, as he crawled to the finish line there, decided to take it nice and easy. But the Corvette driver, absolutely untouchable. He really is the wet weather maestro. The Greek driver taking the win ahead of UKSimRacing's Thomas Noakes, who did well to recover his way back to second place overall and in pro, and then third on that overall podium, your interclass winner of Eduardo Royes. The Spaniard for UKSimRacing for AB Designs, taking that incredible pole position at the start of the qualifying session, and after a good start in this one, he made a couple of mistakes, but he never let go of the inter-win. Max Wheeler, third on the pro podium, fourth overall for Reverso Fast by Free Wheeler Racing, delivering a brilliant second stint to really come forward, and Tom Cordy, meanwhile, for Phoenix Racing Red, a few bumps along the way, but to be fair, second place in interclass and fifth overall, he'll be leaving today happy. Archie Williams, sixth there for Access Sports with SimWorks, a bit of a frustrating middle portion of the race, losing out on the chance of a podium in the pro class, and the same can be said for Tim Probert, who finished 7th behind him for Send It Racing, with his race all falling apart with an extra pit stop right towards the end. Martin Kenyon, he was the first driver to finish a lap down. There are only 7 lead lap finishers, and Kenyon in the end won't be too upset about that, because for him, it's back-to-back club wins, and the Pistec Racing driver also taking his first overall top 10. Hayden Young, we didn't get to see him cross the line and therefore celebrate, but a huge well done to him for 9th overall, and the Send It Racing driver finishing 3rd on the Inter podium. A race-long battle with the likes of Brandon Vincent Squibb, amongst others, and the Type 2 racing driver having to settle for 4th just behind, but 10th on the overall road. Daniel Paynes held of Harry Zern for 11th place, best of the rest there for Old Disney Cars Vintage, ahead of the Spectre Racing Feet Murby car, and then Nick Parks took 13th place for Phoenix Racing Blue, and well, many would wonder if it were not for a couple of his spins, could he have been in an opportunity of a top 5 in the interclass? I would say so. Alexander Vinmark, second in the end in the club class, and 14th overall. Well done to the Base Frost driver, his best ever result in this series, and well, the Norwegian driver was absolutely shining high today, going all the way through from the back of the field, and Stephen Wilkinson as well. Well, it's a top 15 overall for him, and his first ever club podium as well. Not too bad. His first ever top 5 last time out, and now his first podium. I think the Simcast Racing UK drive is going to be incredibly emotional after this one. Jake Muttett, 16th there for Phoenix Racing Blue, just ahead of Kyle Roy for Axis Sport with SimWorks, who definitely showed today that he can do a 720 spin in that Corvette and still keep it in control. John Harley was 18th ahead of Jack Barker there, and then we did see completing your top 20, Grant Miller, 4th of your club drivers, and for the Phoenix Racing Red driver, a top 20 that was hard fought for. Outside the top 20, continuing the theme of lap down drivers, Matthew Massey ahead of Peter Holt, who was 2 laps down, and the Syndic Racing Bulls driver. We're not quite sure what happened to him in the end. Give us a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen. We will just confirm what happened to Peter Holt at the end of the race. And, well, as we understand it, he has received a disqualification as a result, but we believe his disqualification has moved him back to 20 seconds. He's not been disqualified from the race results. He's been disqualified from the lap he was on. So he would have been sent to the back of the lap down. So he's effectively now been brought to the head of those fish two laps down after his contact with Jack Barker, which put him over the disqualification instant point limit at the end of the race. So Syndic Racing Bulls driver having a bit of a difficult end to his race, it could be said, ahead of Max Galgay in the Acura Split Strat Esports, who looked quick in the turn, but unfortunately for him, 6th was the first he could go in the club class today, and he was just ahead of David Pilcher for Simcast Racing UK. Mikey Stewart, Darren Sharples, David Young, and Andrew Montine completed those who will be classified as finishers, albeit Andrew Montine the first of your retirees from this race, and the retiree theme continued with Ryan Clark, Matthew Croft, Jordan Maymar, Austin Graff, Tom Wheeler, Steve Hobbs, James Connolly, Hendrik Zilka, Harvey Wheeler, Luke Sherlock, Jordan Butler, and Cy Ansley all falling victims to the conditions here at Spa-Francorchamps, and that also continued with Ryan Littlemore, Robin Pownier, Jason Brennan, Steve Hughes, Casper Brotner, Ashley Brooks, Anton Kalo, and we also saw non-starts to Kieran Davidson and Darian Giacovelli. But then coming to the individual class fishing positions where the points are made and paid, and here we see in pro, Fotis Katios, the winner for Split Strat Esports. Well, the biggest margins we have seen a pro win by in the history of this series. I don't think we've seen too much bigger than 50 seconds, to be fair. And well, the Split Strat Esports driver doing an incredible job at that, head of UKSimRacing Thomas Noakes. It was then a further minute and 5 seconds back to Max Wheeler for Reverso Fast by Free Wheeler Racing, taking that podium there. He'll be absolutely jubilant with that. And Archie Williams, not quite at the podium today, but a full place there. Some big points coming his way. And the Axis SimSport with SimWorks driver, head of 7-Dip Racers, Tim Probert, who fell apart on strategy in the end, and also some late spins. It didn't quite come together for the Briton. It was a lap down to Kyle Roy, who today normally quite smart in the wet weather, but the wet weather escaping him today, and he took 6th ahead of Darren Sharples, who was 2 laps down, and the old dudes of Cars and Nisha being the last finisher of the race with retirement. So Matthew Croft, Steve Hobbs, Harvey Wheeler, Casper Rotner, Anton Kalo, and Kieran Davidson being a non-starter. Then to the interclass, and here we saw in the second tier of our classes, Eduardo Roy is absolutely untouchable today for Axis SimSports with AB Designs, almost a minute clear of the rest of the field, and Tom Cordy would head it for Phoenix Racing Red. Hayden Young, third there for Zendit Racing, just missing out on doing the 34th lap. With the Zendit Racing driver getting the upper hand on Brandon Vincent Squibb, the two of them back and forth over the distance, whether it's on track or on strategy, and the Type 2 Racing driver in his Ford Mustang today couldn't quite get the power down, and that cost him the chance at the podium. Daniel Pays in the end, taking 5th for Old Dudes and Cars Vintage, holding off Harry Savan. What about it was between those two all the way to the very end, and the Spectra Racing driver wanted to make the move, but unfortunately Pays knew exactly where to run him out of road, and well, I think both drivers there will be a bit hot-headed at the time, but I'm sure they'll enjoy that one when they take a look back at it in the debriefing room afterwards. Nick Parks took 7th place for Phoenix Racing Blue, just ahead of his teammate of Jake Muttett, with both drivers unfortunately falling victim to mistakes and incidents, which did cost them top 5s today, but still some solid points coming their way for the team's championship, and John Hardy was 9th for Spectra Racing Feet Murby, and given how his day started from the back of the field, to come home 9th, he'll be pleased with that. Jack Barker was 10th there for Made for Racing, on course for a potential podium, but sadly a couple of major incidents completely scuppering his chances, and that late contact with Peter Holt, sending Holt down to 11th place there for Zendit Racing Bulls. He was 2 laps down as classified, ahead of Axis SimSport with sim coaches Mikey Stewart, and then we did come to the first two retirees of Andre Martin in 13th place. It was also retirements of Austin Graff, Hendrik Zilka, Luke Sherlock, Cy Anthony, Robin Pownier, Steve Hughes and Ashley Brooks, and well, that was your 20 Inter drivers. Then coming to the club class, last but by no means least in our third tier of class drivers, and Martin Kenyon making it 2 from 2. But if you'd said it was going to be that way at the start of the day, I don't think he would have believed you. But in the end, the belief came after qualifying, and he delivered in the race of Pistech Racing. A minute and a second clear of second and third, but a first-time podium for Alexander Vingmark for Beta Frost, and runner-up today, just beating Stillman Wilkinson in the closing stages, and the Simcast Racing UK driver on the podium in only his second round since his decade-long return. And well, the British driver will be absolutely ecstatic about that, and indeed the team will be celebrating. Wilkinson is definitely showing that whilst he may be a bit of an old hand at the racing, well, he's definitely teaching everyone some new tricks out there. Grant Miller, 4th in the end for Phoenix Racing Red, a further 1.5 minutes behind, but to be fair, keeping it on the road, that's the most important part of the job, ahead of Matthew Massey for Spectra Racing, who came through to take a top 5, and some very valuable points there for the BMW driver. For Split Track Esports' Max Galgate, it was a race where he had all the pace in the Acura, but unfortunately, it wasn't the consistency, but he still took 6th for lap down ahead of David Pilcher, and Simcast Racing UK driver was a lap ahead of David Young, who stayed in it to win it, and in the end, 2 laps down, bringing on home what was that 8th place there and some very valuable points. Ryan Clark was the first of the retirees in 9th, and Jordan Maymar followed suit, and then Tom Wheeler, James Connolly, John Butler, Ryan Littlemore, and Jason Brennan all added their names to the retiree list, and Darren Giacovelli, unfortunately, being a non-starter. But that's a rundown of the results, ladies and gentlemen, from the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps in round number 2, and what an endurance race round it has been. They had to outlast the absolutely tremendous conditions that carried over from qualifying and into the race, and whilst the rain may have put a bit of a deluge on the circuit, it definitely did not put a paw on the race in action, and we had plenty of excitement all the way through. But with that, it is unfortunately time for us to wrap up. And so, thank you very much for watching today, and if you have enjoyed today's show, and perhaps you're sat there right now thinking to yourself, how could I get on the grid as part of SimRacing International for either ongoing or upcoming series? Well, the good news is, whether you're an esports professional all the way through to a rookie racer, there's a spot for you, and all you need to do is join our official Discord, the Beaten Art of the Community, invite link at the bottom of your screen. And when you do, well, we currently have ongoing a mixture of series, including on Thursday evenings, our premier GT3 Championship, and that is broken into 2 splits, Masters and Superstars, for Season 12. Alternatively, if you like your GT machinery, but you prefer a little bit more thrill and no ABS, we've got you covered there, because we've got our Grand Touring Endurance cars, the GTEs. They race in a Friday Championship, Season 2 of which is currently underway, and indeed, absolutely jam-packed that one is on Friday evenings. But of course, you've been tuning into today the UKSimRacing Sunday Showdown series in its 18th edition, and that runs on Sunday evenings, and we'd love to see you on the grid there. Alternatively, if you're looking for something far more casual, perhaps you're just looking to get yourself up to speed, perhaps you're just looking to make friends in the community, well, of course, you can join us on the grid for our free races per week, and that's in our practice league, with those races running on Tuesday evenings, Wednesday evenings, and Saturday evenings. So there's never been a better time to be on the grid at SimRacing International. And at that moment, we'd like to say a big thank you to our series and league sponsors, who do include Karma, Army, Mon Technology, the GP2 Group, and also a big shout out there to Motorsport UK's esports division for recognising us here at SimRacing International as a recommended community. We're very grateful for that recognition, and long may it continue throughout 2026 and beyond. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for our drivers to pack up their bags and make the way southward to Italy, because next time out, we are going to be seeing our drivers take on the sweeping curves and the sharp sequences and the very long start-finish straight of the Autodromo International del Mugello, but more commonly referred to as the Mugello circuit. And after our first 2 rounds, what have we seen? We have definitely seen in the Pro class that Thomas Noakes is up there with the very best of them, but when the wet weather arrives, Fotis Katios definitely seems to be the rain maestro. Meanwhile, in the interclass, well, today Eduardo Royes absolutely led the way by a sterling margin, but will he be back to normal next time out in dry conditions in Italy? And in the club class, whether it's rain or sunshine, Martin Kenyon has made it 2 out of 2. Can he make it a hat-trick next time out and potentially leave everybody looking upwards in his wake? Well, for all that and more, the racing for round number 3 will occur on Sunday the 19th of April 2026, but we invite you to come join us as if it were live as we continue the story on Monday the 20th of April. But until then, well, I've been your host and commentator, Paul Walsh. You've been tuning in to none other than the second round of the Sunday GT3 Championship Season 18 as hosted by SimRacing International on the behalf of UKSimRacing. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay on track. Good night.